So welcome, dear friends. I hope that you are not boiling. It's rather warm. This is something we should get used to and acclimatized in the upcoming years. Just a friendly reminder of the climate change. But let's talk today how to combat the climate change and make Europe much more competitive, profitable and better place to live. And this is where the Greening Competitiveness, the EU's industry path to sustainable leadership, and the EU's Green Industrial Deal is headed towards. Well, let's face it, it's a big transition. It's a triple transition on our industries. One is the climate and biodiversity, planetary boundaries. One is the digitalization, the innovation capacity, and the agility capacities. And the third is changing markets. And USA is, of course, one big boy that is a bit of a troublemaker at the moment, but more and more Asia and China are big players. So how to deal with that? And for that, the companies do need a sound working environment. And this means that kind of a regulation that creates level playing field and a long-term vision, because otherwise we risk on doing sidetrack investments, and we risk of getting exactly that kind of a investment stalemate where we are at the moment. Because to be frank, if I would be an investor, I wouldn't put my money if I wouldn't be sure that this new innovation of renewable energy or energy efficiency or new services concept is supported by regulation, if it's going to fly. And then everybody sort of sits on their hands and waits what happens. And Europe is in a bit of difficult position because we talk differently and act differently. Well, this is not uncommon in politics, to be fair. But when we talk, we are very committed on net zero industry. We have the Net Zero Industry Act, and the idea is that we would be latest 2050, and the plans is to be by 2040 carbon neutral. Beside that, we do have the Critical Raw Materials Act, CRMA. This didn't get so right because it doesn't have the incentives for circular economy. And yes, we do need raw materials, but we should secure first how to get the full circle of the existing materials on functioning and place, and this is what we are lacking. Then reform on electricity market design globally and in EU. This is one of the biggest challenges between our years. We should have a common energy market, flexibility, market regulation, super smart grids, and basically renewable energy, both large scale and small scale combined. And this structure is totally different than member states based in only one or two big sources. And let's come on, face it, it has its place for a time, but gas is gas, it's fossil. And it doesn't turn to be green if you turn it to be hydrogen. And this is one of the big battles in front of us. And how do we make the common market? How do we overcome the national preferences? How do we really incentivize the renewable energy? And on the other hand, the energy efficiency buildings or digitalization, what. Then, of course, it is the funding and investments. We do have Innovation Fund, Repower EU and National Recovery Plans, but the estimates is that we would need 160 to 200 billion euros every year. That can't be public money. So we would need to get the financial regulation, the company reporting. The omnibus doesn't go actually very well at the moment, to have the knowledge for investors to decide where do I buy my energy, my wood, my textiles, my services and whatever. Then we do have the carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM. We just renewed it. Let's see how that will land in the future. And last, the point is that we are very divided with the simplified regulation. No one of us loves complicated regulation. I never start here, let's see how I could make it as complicated as possible. But democracy is not perfect. And then when you simplify, nowadays simplification too often means covering the content out so that you have the empty shell. And I'm just sort of saying quite often that, okay, why do you have a regulatory support for property rights? People can figure out who owns and what. How would you deal the business there? Why do we regulate our people driving on right or left side of the street? Let them figure out. And what does it matter if 5% is driving against the line? It's only 5%. It's voluntary actions are enough. And this kind of a policy that comes from the extreme right, from populism, from Trumpism, is, as you have seen a lot of in wave in Europe at the moment, in Omnibus, that is the company reporting, in green claims, in forest deforestation, in many of the other places, and that is maybe something we would need to tackle and take up in the future. But this is all from me, and I'm now turning to our keynote address. Peter Backer, President CEO of World Business Council for Sustainable Development, a partner in strategic partner of the Global EU. And now from my semi-gloomy points, let's turn to you. Innovating for tomorrow, aligning competitiveness with sustainability. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's not often that I'm invited to speak as an optimist, because if you work in sustainability, that's short to come by. Anyway, I work in WBCSD, which means we're a sustainability organization, a business organization for sustainability, which means we use public transport and walk as much as we can, which was a grave error today. I'm not nervous.
But you're close to fame.
I just transported myself irresponsibly today. So WBCSD, I've seen the guest list with half an eye. So some of the companies in the room are part of it. It's a member-based organization. 250 members from around the world. Just under 50% are Europe headquartered, so happy to be in Brussels. 250 sounds like a lot or a little, depending on your perspective, but it's a good thing to know that that's 26% of all emissions in the world are in those 250 companies. Obviously, scope 1, 2, 3. 88% of those emissions are scope 3. So if you want to decarbonize the world, you need to decarbonize the value chains of large companies, and then you'll swipe a whole lot of the economy with you. 24% of all corporate revenue in the world is in our membership. So in terms of emissions, we are bigger than China, which is the only statistic I can give you in that comparison, but it sounds really good, doesn't it? Anyway, thank you, Globe EU, for inviting me to say a few words. I'll talk for 15 minutes. And then if there is time from the chair, we can do some Q&A. Greening competitiveness is precisely what we need to talk about. I'll talk a bit about where is sustainability globally, what does that mean for business, how does that translate to a competitiveness agenda for business, and then talk a bit about Europe with some real-life examples of things you might consider if you want to simplify. I'm Dutch, so diplomacy comes very short. So I apologize if I say anything that upsets anyone, but it's in the water. Anyway, sustainability is facing headwinds. The best way to describe that is when the CEO of the largest oil and gas company in the world walks onto a stage of an oil and gas conference and says, we can feel the wind of history in our industry's sails. This happened 2 weeks after the inauguration of a president whose name I have promised myself not to mention until he's gone. So you have to fill in the blanks occasionally yourselves. Anyway, all kind of things are happening. Anti-woke is a thing, anti-science is a thing. Geopolitics make multilateralism really difficult. And so COP30, the climate COP in Brazil later this year, will be the ultimate test if we can still have global conversations that resolve topics like climate change and others. We're very close to the presidency of COP30. They're doing an utmost job, but at the moment, my prediction is the global south, led by China, will run away with the story. US will not show or try to sabotage, and Europe has a choice to make whether it wants to play or stay behind, in simple Dutch terms. So it's an interesting world to operate in. In many ways, the world, I mean, we all know the book, The Art of the Deal, and somehow that's become the modus operandi of the world. You know, I'll make a deal on anything, whether it's conflict or trade, or if you do this, I might do that, and if you don't do this, I do that. And that's interesting. The only thing to keep in our minds is climate will not come to the negotiation table. Climate will not make compromises. Climate just is. And we've all been waiting outside. We feel that it's becoming rather nasty. And the longer we wait in getting serious on this topic, the more of this and worse will come our way. So, the challenge is clear. If you look at the planetary health check, has anyone ever seen the planetary health check? Do you raise hands or no? Yeah, I see one hand, a few of you. So once a year now, for the first time September last year, the global scientists are publishing what they call the planetary health check. Just like you and I, when we go to the doctor once every so many years, please check up all the vitals and you get a report, and then you're either healthy or you're in trouble. Same thing now with the planet. We, in my world, in the world of sustainability, we talk about 1.5, keep 1.5 alive, which is what science says is the threshold for the safe operating space for humanity. Listen to those words, the safe operating space for humanity. And again, outside, and if you're in Sevilla today, where it's 46 degrees and the conference for finance for development is starting, you'll know that safe operating space, if you're a worker on the land trying to harvest the vegetables that we all want to eat, this is not very safe anymore. So in the planetary health check, for the first time it is said, we cannot stay below 1.5 anymore. The 1.5 boundary is let go by science. We will overshoot, we will go to 1.8, between 1.8 and 2.7 degrees. We must decarbonize as fast and to the max we can, and then hope that within 2 to 3 decades, we'll bend the curve back under 1.5 degrees. That's the best the scientists have to offer us, and they hope in those intermediate 2 to 3 decades, nature will not cause its tipping points to tip, which means Iceland, North Pole ice sheet, South Pole ice sheet, permafrost in Siberia will not defrost and put more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere or raise sea levels by more than 10 meters. So we're in a very, very precarious point. It's not just climate. We talk a lot about climate because we begin to experience it. The language that Mother Nature uses, and you begin to ask yourself, where's the optimism going to come from? Is water, because all of this plays out in either droughts or floods or severity of storms, raising temperatures in oceans, which causes heat domes over Europe and North America, or floods in China, all in the same week. So nature, climate is not negotiating, and it's upon us. The challenge is clear, our response is not yet clear. It's not that we don't know what to do, the solutions are pretty much known, we just are not getting on quickly enough. And like I said, the headwinds won't help. The world is moving multi-regional. The financial markets and the real economy are not yet aligned, which personally I think is the biggest hurdle we have. Companies do not have the incentives to go faster because the capital market is still too short-term focused and financial results only. And physical risks are rapidly rising. And I'll promise you this is the last bit of depressing news. A European beverage company, I'm not going to name names, producing alcoholic beverages, about $12 billion revenue, $1.5 billion EBITDA. Big company, very profitable. Has made a mapping of all locations in the world where they grow commodities, grapes and wheat and whatever else you need to make alcoholic drinks. For each location, weather models and climate models to predict how will climate change weather, how will rainfall, heat and other things impact the yield of the commodities. In most cases, almost all cases, yield comes down. If yield comes down, commodity price goes up, profit comes down. Millions of scenarios given the many locations where they grow their stuff. Base case scenario, $1.5 billion EBITDA 5 years from now will be reduced to zero. That's how close physical risk is. That's an extreme case because it's sensitive commodities, they grow. It's a land-based value chain, so it has immediate impact from weather and other impacts. But that's how close it now is. The world, all insurance companies in the world have a budget of $150 billion of damages as a result of climate and weather a year. LA fires have used $130 billion of that already. We're blowing through insurance budgets, which means your insurance premiums will shoot up or your assets will no longer be insurable. And then you have to self-insure on your balance sheet and see how long you're happy to carry those risks. So that's really the main thrust, which is great news, by the way, because this makes climate an economic conversation, not a moral conversation about let's go save the polar bear, but I cannot carry this on my balance sheet, or the damages are now such that my profit is at risk. So what we see in this headwind is that also the sustainability people, anyone in the room who considers them such, need to look in the mirror. For too long, we've been happy making promises. We called them commitments or setting targets. I don't need any more commitments or any more targets. I need execution and action. And you will be held accountable for the execution and the action that you will be implementing. And that's where disclosure frameworks, which are not simple at all, are in our way at the moment. So I'll talk about that for a little bit. We need to get the financial markets to understand these physical risks, but also the opportunities. So how do we change capital market valuation and allocation models? It's a second big piece of work that is ongoing. We need to find ways to talk to people. For too long, we are very happy as Sustainability to talk to each other in terms of CO2 and Scope 3 emission reductions and all kind of fancy words that most people outside have no clue what we're on about. And therefore, we have lost the popular vote. And last but not least, we need to understand, and that's the theme for today, that sustainability is not about compliance. You were out of the room maybe. CSRD is in our way. It drives compliance. Sustainability is about competitiveness, about future-proofing the business, about making your business resilient. That's the focus we all need to bring. Any interview I do these days, I get the question, Peter, what is happening? Business is backtracking. Are they still in? Are they still committed? And the answer is absolutely yes. So the popular perception is business has stepped down. And sure, companies like Unilever, the poster child for sustainability, for a little while have had horrible PRs when they adapted their targets or commitments. But what we did, and we launched it last week in London Climate Action Week, which should, by the way, be Brussels Climate Action Week. Why do we give that to the UK? But anyway, 700 events in 5 days in London, bringing the who's who of this space together. We there launched the Business Breakthrough Barometer. If you go to wbcsd.org, you can download that thing, super interesting read. 300 executives from around the world were interviewed, deep dive analysis were made on all those interviews. The answer is that 91% of the respondents are investing the same or more in their net zero journey than they did last year. 94% have said we do continue to invest the same or more, but only where the enabling environment is supportive. And that's a very important thing for the EU and anyone in this space to understand. What does that mean? That means three things. We need to have stable, predictable policies. We need to have access to affordable, renewable energy. And we need some form of demand stimulation, because consumers need to be convinced or helped to make this transition happen. 61% of the respondents said the climate costs are already in our P&L today. And 50%, 56% of them said this is not about compliance, this is about competitiveness. So all these things combined is that sustainability from a company point of view is now about a business case. So the CSO is still an important expert, but this needs to be in the board, in the corporate strategy. The mistake that people like myself make, and I'm fighting it, but the bubble still pushes us there, they talk about transition plans. That's nonsense. It's corporate strategy that needs to change. Anyway, the business case is pretty clear. There's massive revenue growth opportunities if you innovate, massive cost efficiencies in energy efficiency, in circular models. There's risk resilience to be had. Like I said, the physical risks are much closer than people realize. So let's say a few words about European competitiveness. You know, obviously, if you get invited to a session like this, and I don't come to Brussels every week, you read the Draghi report one more time and you say, what did he have to say about the greening or sustainability and competitiveness? And it's super interesting, and I can give you the examples. Electricity is twice the price of USA, gas 4 to 5 times the price of USA. Port of Rotterdam, which I happen to be close to, is losing companies because of the price of energy. Not because they don't like Rotterdam or support the sustainability push there, but because the cost levels are just not right. So what Draghi also says is decarbonization is the single biggest innovation wave that Europe can unleash. And we have 20% of all the patents in clean tech already here, so let's go big on that. But today the R&D in US companies is $270 billion larger than the R&D in this space for European companies. 270 billion more investments in a space will make you lose out. So how do we step that up? And the one thing, and I'll talk in one or two examples about that, the mistake we make in Europe is that we do not think about coherent solutions. This is not about moving from a combustion engine to an electric engine. This is about changing the system, making sure there's charging points, there is renewable energy, that consumers understand these issues, that insurance companies don't price EVs higher than in combustion engines. The whole system needs to be changed. And therefore, regulating individual companies or sectors is just going to stifle innovation. We need system transformation thinking, coherence in policies across. So let me give you 2 or 3 real-life cases, which some I'm I hope to attract strong disagreements in the room, because I have the microphone, you don't. But anyway, stuff to think about. So automotive is a great example, European automotive. Under massive competitive pressure. Are they making the transition to EVs fast enough? How will the tariff wars play out? The key markets, both in China, US, are at risk. China competition is at all-time peak and raising much faster than European automotives can innovate. And then we have all the legislation in Europe that stifles them, because if they don't go fast enough, then they get massive penalties, which will further reduce their financial whereabouts. But nobody talks about the system change, what I just said, renewable energy, charging points, consumer demand. And we need to find much more dynamic policy models to make these transitions happen than just stifle individual groups of companies. Carbon markets, they're coming back at full force. And I don't know if there's environmentalists in the room, and I love you to bits, but we have to stop with the ideology around carbon markets. We cannot reach net zero fast enough if we do not use carbon markets, carbon removals, to the maximum speed we can get them out. Because you look outside, and this is at not even 1.5 degrees. This will get much worse. So carbon markets are back. UK, Singapore, Kenya have launched a coalition that is grow carbon markets. The supply side integrity, quality is now organized by ICVM. Even I can't remember all the acronyms, but the supply side is organized. How do we bring the demand side, i.e. corporates buying these credits or removals, back to space? How do we get Europe to be stable when it comes to green claims? 1 week it's in, the other week it's out. We need stable policies, predictable policies, and then business can play to that tune. Anyway, I would support anyone who has something to say, make VCM, voluntary carbon markets, technical and natural removals part of our plan. And then compliance, CSRD and the likes. I talk for a living to all the large companies in the world. Many have said we have now allocated 80% of our sustainability capacity on figuring out CSRD. We have stopped the innovation because we don't have more resources. That's the wrong answer. Why are we doing CSRD? We need to do it, absolutely, because we want companies to make better decisions, which will lead to transparent disclosures about the progress they make, so that investors get decision-useful information to allocate capital to the companies that are trying to make progress. That's what we want. And I doubt that CSRD in its current form is able to deliver that. We certainly need one global baseline, and ISSB is the one. There is no other. So let's align with that. Let's simplify the nature disclosures. TCFD has worked on 10 disclosure metrics, not 4 different standards as CSRD is having it. That's what the type of simplification we should try to push for, because we want companies to make better decisions and hold them accountable for the progress they're making. So the role of an organization like mine is to bring companies together that want to go fast. Our focus is how can we bring the value chains together. Like I said, 24% of all corporate revenue in the world. Much of it is stuff being bought and sold to each other. How can we green that first? So how can we reduce the emissions? How do we integrate this deeply in the corporate performance and accountability system? So the whole shebang of carbon accounting, nature accounting, all the way down to valuation models in capital markets. And the last but not least is how do we boost knowledge? And that means education programs for all layers of companies, starting with the board down to operators. The ask of the EU and of any national legislation is give us clear, consistent and stable policy. But make it a dynamic, open dialogue, because transitions are not linear. It's easy to say, again, combustion engine to EV. It's very hard to predict how the market will actually transition. And you need to be agile as you move along. And that brings me to a close. So we have headwinds, And some people say, well, it's pretty tough, but you know, I'm from the Netherlands. There's a lot of water there, so some of us like to sail. I'm not one of those people, but I have friends who have sailboats, and they occasionally invite me on. So we just need to adjust the sails and use the wind in whatever direction it comes from. But in 3 simple sentences, where we are and what we need to move from commitments to action. That's one. So no more promises in 2050. What are you going to do in the next 5 years, and how can we see that that works? That's the conversation we need. We need to move from morality to materiality. I don't care about saving the world for now. I need to know what is material to your business, to your supply chain. What are you going to do to make that resilient? And last but not least, we need to understand that we need to quickly move from compliance to a sense of competitiveness. Because this is the biggest innovation opportunity ahead of us. If we fail, we're in trouble and we're back in depression. But if we make it, there is still a road for Europe to really lead this transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent as always. And here we can quite clearly testify that the forward-looking businesses, that actually is a big chunk of the businesses, I don't know how you would evaluate 1/3 or 1/2, is far more radical and forward-looking than the politics in average. It's pretty interesting and positive developments that we would need to benefit much more. And as you said, it's so vital to have the enabling environments. And politics can't do it alone. We need the businesses. We need to figure it out together. And that leads to my thinking that I hope that one part of our sort of understanding afterwards is to create that kind of a loose or tight, whatever community to gear, as you said, the operational actions.
Yeah.
How to develop the sustainable finance in general and the reporting, and to harmonize and put it in one framework, align it with ISSB, how to make this kind of a bigger system change possible, not only this kind of a silos. And the politics is working very much also in silos and trying to tweak one deal here and one part here. And then find a new innovative, not so innovative old ways. Like the biggest part of our public finances actually is public procurement. Where do we put that? Do we put it as push, buy cheapest and preferably outside the EU, or do we use it as a pull effort and enable by these actions the more sustainable practices, businesses, material or service wise? And then, of course, last but not least, and let's hear first today the examples and possibilities, how we can turn the tide slightly in politics and hear that, okay, it's not only those ones feeling the pain and difficulties in change that are very, very vocal at the moment. It is the big majority who are actually working and going forward all of the time. So now we would have a couple of minutes for questions and comments. Please raise your hands. And could you please state your name too?
Yes, Larry Moffat. I'm with the Press Club Brussels Europe. I'd like to know what you see as the role of banks in financing and facilitating the transition. There's this report that just came out, Banking on Climate Chaos, which shows that big commercial banks are continuing to fund fossil fuels with the risk of ending up with stranded assets. How can they be encouraged to go in the right direction to stop funding fossil fuels?
Yeah, I think banks play a vital role in an economy. There is a bit of, again, I'm not an expert in banking regulation, but when I talk to bankers, I hear there's regulation, the Basel Convention and others, that is quite stifling in their ability to respond to some of these risks. There's commercial reasons for relationships they have with clients, and they need to respect those. But the starting point for me is super simple in the same. That is, do the banks understand the risks in their own portfolios? I've done 3 presentations to boards, top boards of banks in the last couple of months with the simple question. I've looked at your balance sheet. You seem to be a big owner of real estate, either people's homes or commercial real estate. Have you ever done an analysis of the climate risks, the flood and the drought risks in those portfolios? The answer is no, we're not. That's not part of our risk profile. Well, it will strongly devaluate the value of certain of those assets depending on where they may be. And that awareness is beginning to grow, but is not regulated to grow. And so make that part of any risk stress test that these type of organizations need to do. The other thing is make part that they are being held accountable for the scope 3 of their activities. Companies, some of the companies here in the room, they have terribly long supply chains running from any corner in the world when it comes to raw materials and selling stuff to all other corners of the world. And they're being held accountable for scope 3 emissions and need to figure out how am I going to work with my suppliers or the use phase to reduce those emissions. Similarly, you should put that on banks. If you have a portfolio, do you understand the scope 3 of your impacts? Whether you can always be held accountable is an interesting question, and that needs to be carefully had. But it begins with, do you actually know where the emissions are in your portfolio?
Catherine, here when switching to Europe, I actually have a follow-up question on this risks. So, and you mentioned before CSRD, not bad that it's like being cut down. Now the thresholds are increasing during this discussion, so that means more and more companies would be exempt, and the long supply chains that large companies have. Well, how to assess the risk, because the major idea here, as I understand, on the reporting side and also on due diligence, is to be able to assess the major risks for companies across the supply chains and to address them across the supply chains. So I'm just curious, how would you see that then? How would that work out in the future?
Yeah, I don't think that will be solved by regulation. This will be solved by AI. So what we need is much better data in the supply chains with as simplified as possible data collection tools as we can imagine. Because the big company that sits in the middle or the end of the supply chain can work it out. They have plenty people and smart cookies to make the analysis. But wherever you go in the supply chain, up or down, the higher up you go, the smaller the companies become. And sometimes in places where digital is still not very well present. And that's, one of the things that we've now developed in our shop, which will become the norm globally, is product level scope 3 accounting. Mm-hmm. So we don't need corporate level scope 3. I couldn't care less about it. You can't act on it. But if I can give you product level real-time carbon emissions, then you can decide, okay, I need to change a certain input or a certain supplier or the transport lines need to be shortened, whatever the causes of those emissions may be, and then you can act. So the methodology, the data exchange protocol has now been developed. It's being tested by thousands of companies. It works. It has reduced 39% of emissions for the companies that are testing it. There's massive benefits to be had. But AI will be a massive unlock. Because the data flow will be gigantic. And you can't have enough analysts to have to analyze that themselves, but particularly the data capture needs to be really rethought. How can we do that with sensoring, satellites, any type of input, bill of lading, whatever it may be that people can use. But by really focusing on getting the right decision useful information, flowing that through a supply chain, you'll do a lot. And regulation needs to follow to then make that the way that needs to be done. But for instance, this product level scope 3 accounting, Singapore, I mean, if you want to look at competitiveness, go to Singapore. They're racing ahead faster than anyone else, including China. So Singapore Stock Exchange, Singapore government, Singapore corporations have created the carbon registry, which is now the first registry in the world that has made this product level scope 3 accounting the norm. If you want to disclose in Singapore, that's what you use. And they're getting better. The data is not all good, but give it time and AI, and that will work its way towards better data. The big mistake we all make in this space is we want perfection, and then we're all going to be dead. We just need to do it and then make it better as we go. But you need, for me, the battle is data, and that will inform banks. That will, I mean, some of you are in the AI space. That will play a massive role. But that's where we're going to win or lose the battle. But then the question is always the same. Are we sure the data we're collecting is decision useful information? Will the company make better decisions if they have it? Or will investors allocate capital as a result of the information you disclose? Because, I mean, I don't know if there's economics in the room, but the end goal is super simple. More sustainable business has a lower cost of capital. That's when sustainability will be won. And for that to happen, you need the financial system to gear up, the data to gear up, the policy to be enabling, and companies to act on the decisions that they need to make.
We have actually 4 questions. Let's, if it is okay to you, take them in a row. First one is
Rafael Cayuela.
in line, please.
Hello, thank you very much, and great presentation as always, and nice to see some of the people from last year. Bruno, Ronald, sorry not to be with you. So I was speaking last year. I love this event. So let me say just 2 things. One is I wanted to build up on what you said, Peter. I love your presentation, but I also have a particular question. So I agree that it's not time for commitment, but for action, clearly. But I think indeed Europe has been leading in policies. Unfortunately, has not been translating progress, and we are still lagging behind, especially with regards to United States or even China. Much importantly, I think you mentioned internal combustion engines or the automotive industry. I just wanted to raise one point to illustrate that. In China in 2010 was importing 2 million cars, mainly from Europe. Today, in 2021, they actually become an exporter of electrical vehicles, and in the future, by 2030, they might export 4 million cars. So they went through industrial policy and made in China 2025 from being an importer to an exporter. I think you mentioned very rightfully that it's very important to have cohesion and a systemic change. I think we need full industrial policy in a very long term. And I think I fully agree on all your elements that you mentioned, that we need to have framing conditions from different things, technology readiness, ecosystems, demand side. My question is the following. If I look at China, China has been leading on the supply push. They have massively incentivized industries, and they have been creating new ecosystems. They went from 0 automotive companies to 40 electrical vehicles. Where do you see the supply push and basically incentives to decarbonize as an opportunity for Europe, especially on this race for green products? Thank you very much, and sorry for the long intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Mark van Lichten, I'm a consultant and university lecturer. Following up on the question that was just put, the good news is that a lot of clean technology is coming on stream. The bad news is that 3/4 of it is Chinese. We're getting wiped out of solar. We're getting wiped out of electrical vehicles. Most importantly, on the backbone of if you were a European policymaker, what would be your advice vis-a-vis Chinese technological products? I mean, we have anti-subsidy duties on cars. We are putting in place things through the international procurement instrument for the subsidies regulation. The drawback of that is that obviously, if you make those products more expensive, then the cleaning transition is slowed down. So, you know, what is your take on this pretty delicate subject?
Menno van Dijk, also Dutch, Security Nation. I have the following question for you. Would you put our money, our savings, our pensions on large incumbents innovating themselves out of this crisis, or on the clean tech attackers becoming the new unicorns? Do you believe in industry transformation or creative destruction?
Easy questions. And then we had still one.
Yeah, Victor from Clean Tech, it actually was a very similar question to what just asked, which is we seem to have constantly this dilemma in Europe between do we want to be a manufacturing hub of clean technologies paying a premium, maybe a security premium as well, because I think the world is showing that there's really clean tech and security are strongly intertwined these days, versus deployment, and that we want to go for the cheapest option. So I'm very curious on exactly your thoughts. How do we straddle that constant dilemma across policies?
Wow. Come out for a speech. Anyway, so full disclosure, I'm advisor to the Chinese government in actually 2 councils. So I work a lot with ministers over there. It's very impressive what China is doing. From a foreign policy, I would be very careful as Europe to alienate ourselves too far from China. It's not as bad a fellow as somebody to the west of us makes us believe. That's just geopolitical power play. I think it's a culture that is quite open. I mean, I'm Dutch. I've done a lot of business in my prior role in China, and we would always laugh that the Dutch are the Chinese of Europe, which means we're traders, and Chinese are traders. And so I would keep that trading relationship quite open. You're absolutely right. Some parts of industry, they have an enormous head start. A size of a market that can drive unit costs down, even if all trade in the world were to stop, much faster than we would ever do. And I would say, let's see smartly how we can use some of that technology in some sectors. And I'm also on the advisory board of Mercedes-Benz, another side thing. I have great belief in the commitment, the innovation, and the positioning power of European brands. But they're using Chinese batteries in some of their solutions. Oh, okay, let's see if that's a good or a bad choice, but that's where the market is. There are the world, making the world net zero is not about batteries and EVs alone. And let's begin to talk about the portfolio of real estate. That's a massive opportunity to decarbonize, to build new. If you look at, there's a project, it's called Climate Kick, I think, is working with 150 cities in Europe on net zero plans for Europe. And if you want to make a city net zero, yes, you need to think about transport and therefore EV and that type of solutions. But you mainly think about the building portfolio, the food system that enters that. I think for me, the game in Europe should be in the food system, abolish negative, bad incentive subsidies as fast as possible, become the absolute leader in regenerative agriculture type of solutions, make sure from a food security point of view that we can feed our own people, but also innovate the hell out of that, because there's so much to be gained in that system, both in terms of productivity as well as in the environmental footprint. But if you look at the 150 cities working together on net zero plans, that will lead to an industrial demand for clean buildings, clean energy solutions in buildings, whatever else you need in a city. That is going to be the demand signal for a massive industrial supply game. And that's my invite constantly. Let's not talk about how do we make Brussels net zero. I couldn't care one iota, if I say it diplomatically. But if we...
For a Dutchman, yes.
Yeah, that was quite good, right? But if we make the 150 largest cities in Europe and create an industrial plan behind it, we have the best cement companies in the world in Europe. You know, we have all kind of best category businesses here. Let's create a massive supply signal, demand signal for supply, and let's then create an industrial policy behind that. So that, to the first question, is where I see massive opportunities. Buildings, a food and ag system. But if I talk, I'm not the expert, but if I talk to my team, which is the leading team in food and ag, and the amount of time I hear them frustrated about regen ag conversations in Brussels, I think, wow, that's weird. You know, this is a massive opportunity. Why do we talk us and them, policymakers and business? I agree. We need policymakers, we need corporates, and we need the financial world. That's the engine for change. And then we collectively need to figure out what is the demand signal or support we need to give consumers to buy whatever it is that then is the result of it. But that triangle needs to sit down together saying, how do we design a system solution? Which companies do we need? Sectors do we need? Which policies need to get tuned? And what financial instruments do we need to get that going? And that to me is a big unlock. I don't know. I think whether it's incumbents or startups, the culture in Europe is not very strong on getting startups off the ground fast. We enjoy too much when things fail rather than use it as a lesson to go faster. Maybe that's just the Dutch culture, and other parts of Europe are better at it. But if you look at the amount of VC money in Europe, it's way behind the US. I'm sure there's areas where startups can destruct. But the notion is always the same. The battle for Europe to me, is really in the industrial side of things. And that means massive employment. Again, automotive, I think, is 13 million employees in Europe. Fine if Tesla or BYD can destroy that.
You're referring to a figure that is often cited for the...
Thank you. Was it correct?
Yes. I don't know what I pushed, but it agreed with you.
Good. Not bad then. But anyway, we can't destroy everything. We need to stimulate the incumbents to change fast as well. And yeah, some areas I'm sure destruction will help, but and to the Chinese, yeah, maybe BYD has won the game already and the game is over. But then this is unbelievable. If I go to BYD, where is the biggest single investment they make in Europe, in the world, outside of China? It's in Hungary.
But you know why.
Well.
So that's not difficult.
Well, but still, why?
No transfer of technology and massive state subsidy.
Yeah, no, but why?
No coherent European policy.
If we have an industrial policy, let's bring those good giants, let's invite them in the heart of Europe. I mean, you're not going to win competition by wishing they go away. That's not the way competition works. And if somebody is better, then invite them to be part of your town, not send them away. Anyway, apologies for the language.
Well, that was a good conclusion. Let's invite all the good actors together with different vocabulary, whatever we wish to have. And let's get the thing rolling. We already know more or less not only the direction but the way how to go forward.
I have 4 very fresh-looking, eager-looking panelists here with me, belonging to those 94% of businesses, unless they want to contradict me, that Peter referred to that will continue and wants to continue to invest in this transition that we all need, provided that we can offer from the European Union and from national authorities the right incentive and the correct framework to have to stimulate those investments and to make them possible. And so we'd like to hear from them in their respective sectors what it is that needs to be done, where the opportunities are, where the challenges are, what we are doing right, and what we maybe need to do a lot better than we are doing it today. And so I'm going to give the floor first to Gerald Rebitzer from Amcor, maybe a company that is less known than some of the others that will take the floor later. But please, Gerald, thank you for coming first of all, and we're eager to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Bruno. Thanks for having me. Yeah, maybe first, what is Amcor? Like I said, it's not normally known if you're not in the industry, but you probably all use some of our products every day. So we are essentially the largest, globally largest producer of packaging, specifically for fast-moving consumer goods, food and beverage, as well as medicine. So here are some examples. I'll get to that. But basically, it's packaging out of aluminum and paper and plastics. Essentially, this is kind of where we are in. I'm Vice President Sustainability, Operations and Advocacy for Europe and Asia. And the role is really to drive action internally and also in collaboration with others. Like Peter Becker said, it's really about moving from commitments to actions. And I think that's really the important part. I think in the past there was a tendency, companies made a commitment, the commitment was not met. Okay, so we make another more ambitious commitment, and then it moves on. But I don't think you don't win anything in that. And actually, one of our customer also once says there are no heroes in sustainability when you're already talking about communications and commitments. Nevertheless, what I want to talk about, really, specific actions. Like I said, we are the world's largest packaging company, and what kind of happened in packaging over the years, specifically what we do, the packaging indeed got more and more efficient. We should also forget, if we're talking about sustainability, often packaging is in the spotlight, but it's actually much more important what the packaging does than what it is. So in the end, if we talk about packaging for food, for medicine, normally the packaging has 5 to 10% of kind of environmental impact, then to protect basically essential foods, medicine. So if you have worse packaging, you actually have a lot more food waste, and we probably all know, food waste. About 1/3 of food that is produced, for instance, globally is thrown away. Also in Europe, it's more on the household side, for instance. And that is a huge impact. There's also some calculation of food waste was a country. Would be the third largest country after the US and China in terms of carbon emissions. So in a way, first the packaging has to work. What happened over the years, packaging really got more and more efficient using less materials. Honestly, in many cases, when we talk about a flexible packaging like this, from a carbon footprint point of view, it's extremely efficient because it uses minimal amount of material.
Get some divine intervention.
Going your turn.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically, there was a lot more efficiency, but then the efficiency also lead to a situation where a lot of these materials were not recyclable. So in a sense, you would have combinations of materials, like such a pouch for food would often be like an aluminum layer, a very thin aluminum foil in combination with two different plastics, maybe a paper. which then makes it kind of very efficient, makes it functional, but essentially unrecyclable. And then in the end, for me, the point is we need to keep the efficiency, further obviously drive decarbonization also for the material itself, but then also make it circular. So in 2018, we actually did a commitment to make all our packaging available in recyclable solutions. So at that time, specifically flexible packaging, which has most of the challenges, maybe a bit around more than 50% kind of met those requirements. But then we said by 2025, we want to offer all those solutions in recyclable options. Today we are not at all. We are at basically 95%, but we have really made big progress on that. And for instance, a package like this, which is like a retort packaging, so something where food gets heated in the processing, so that it then basically keeps fresh, and you do not have to refrigerate it, for instance, afterwards. People said, well, we know you're big in that segment. How do you do this? Because we know this cannot be done. But today, it's done, and you can make this on a monoplastic solution, which is actually recyclable. Obviously, in some parts of the world, we also have to work much more on the infrastructure. But the first step is the innovation to make sure it can be recycled. And like I said, today we are at around 95%. It's not really about the materials, it's really about the right material. Like this is an example in more pharmaceutical packaging, which is kind of the highest standard in terms of barrier safety, where you kind of have a mono aluminum packaging, also very well recyclable. Or then for other applications, it might be a mono, also polypropylene packaging, that also does the job. So this is then, let's say different medication with less barrier requirements than the aluminum piece. So in the end, it really can be done. It requires some investment. We have nearly 2,000 R&D people working on packaging development and then circularity, and also actually decarbonization is always part of the brief. So we need to make sure that any new development is actually meets design for recyclability requirement and also contributes towards decarbonization. I should also say that a lot of the work on recyclability, for instance, when we simplify the materials, also supports decarbonization in a sense, because a lot of times then the materials are kind of inherently lower impact. So I think for us, that's an important example. And maybe to close, when we make the link to regulation, obviously in the packaging space, PPWR, the packaging and packaging waste regulation is the big piece of legislation, which we really very much welcome. I think it will help us to kind of further drive this, because obviously the one element is to have those materials available. It's a bit like in EVs, but then also to sell it, that everybody then, buys it. This is obviously going up very strongly, but then, PPWR kind of is also the enabler for that it's not like a nice to have, but then that the packaging on the market actually is recyclable and will be recycled.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very nice example of what you can do through regulation. Don't hear very much people welcoming regulation in this house. It's refreshing to hear. But I think it shows what you can do with regulation that creates a market. And so I'm very happy to have maybe a little bit better known name in the corporate world with Dow Chemicals, where we remain in plastics. So very welcome to you, Jimena Kanda. Can you give us a view of where you need market creation, or where we are not doing it enough, or maybe in the wrong way?
Sure. So definitely for us, we have been working a lot on different solutions when it comes to sustainability. And of course, we have our decarbonization commitments and different ways on how to get there. But for us, circular economy specifically is one of the key pillars of decarbonization. If you don't know the chemical industry or the plastics industry, historically it was based on fossil-based materials. There's a lot of innovation going into using alternative feedstocks, so waste or bio, and basically trying to recover the waste and use that as a new raw material. This allows not just to, prevent waste or reuse the waste, but also avoid incineration of the waste, and also avoid, creation of the need for fossil-based materials, because we're now using waste as the new raw material for the business. And a lot was said before about the business case, and let me be extremely frank. The business case is not always there. We have a lot of solutions for recycled materials, and we're not finding necessarily the demand that we need to scale up those solutions. I will talk about demand more in a second, but I do want to make a few points on the supply side of things. There's a lot of innovation that has gone and needs still to go into solutions that allow using waste as a raw material. Historically, we have used fossil-based materials. Now, what happens when you start using waste as a raw material? And I'll give you a very concrete example of one of the challenges of using waste as a raw material. It's very hard to move it around within the European Union. When you try to move waste from Belgium to the Netherlands, or the Netherlands to France, or the secondary raw materials to transport them around, it's very difficult. There's paperwork. What one state says it's waste, the other state thinks it's a product, so they require different paperwork. Things don't match. Trucks get sent back home. This is within the EU. I'm not even talking about globally. This is simplification, guys. Like, this in my mind is the simplification agenda. Kind of like, how do we make it simpler to really use waste as a raw material, for example, to scale up circularity, to access waste from different sources, create secondary raw materials, use those at scale. Declaration of end of waste or mutual recognition of member states, you name it. That's simplification of policy to actually get to sustainability. And that's making supply very costly. It's very costly today to produce secondary raw materials, to produce recycled materials, and a lot is driven by these burdens that we have to actually think of waste, not as the last stage of the first value chain, but think of waste as the first stage of the secondary value chain. So there's a lot that policy can do to help create this, to solve this from the supply side. But you mentioned a bit, and you did as well, what happens at the demand. When we start looking up on things like mandatory recycled content, this creates a demand pool for these solutions, to scale up these solutions. This gives predictability to do the investments that you need to really get to scale on these solutions, because you're trying to move away from a linear economy that has had 300 years, 150 years. If you took plastics, almost 100 years. How do you move it so fast from one place to the other? And clearly it was said that we have no time to waste, and it's super hot outside. I believe there's no time to waste anymore. So when you talk about recycled content, policy can really help create demand for these solutions to really give the certainty that we need to do the investments to scale up. And I'll give you two examples. I know we talked about cars from the internal combustion engine, but I want to talk about cars from the circularity standpoint. I could also talk about packaging, but here Amcor knows better than me the topic, and he addressed the issue already. Let's look at cars. Today we're having Parliament discussing, voting on Monday, mandatory recycled content in cars. This is critical because it allows to create a demand pool of circular solutions that today exist for cars, but they don't find the right demand. I'll give you two examples of technologies. Dow, for example, has invested in the first world-scale, large-scale in the world facility in France to recycle polyurethane foams. This is the foams that you find in mattresses, for example. That's a foam. It's used in car seats. And we're already working with GLR and Ardient to use that recycled foam into car seats. When we start having things like mandatory recycled content in cars that include polyurethane, for example, that's a massive demand pool to keep investing in our Renova facility, for example, that today is not finding demand. It's not operating as it could, and it's not sourcing as it could because there's not finding demand for these solutions that, okay, today are more expensive because we're using now old mattresses to go into car seats. And I'll give you another example. Thermoplastic elastomers. I know it sounds super technical, it is, but I'll simplify. When you look at a car, the bumper, the interiors, everything that you see there that looks like plastic, it's a combination of plastics. It's polypropylene with different elastomers that provide the performance that polypropylene needs for the impact, for example. There's specific requirements when you design the car because of the safety elements. And yet, we have solutions to have recycled content in those thermoplastic elastomers. So in that way, it's not just the polypropylene that can get recycled content, it's also the elastomers. But Parliament on Monday is voting an exclusion to get recycled content out of the elastomers. All of the elastomers. And I have all of this innovation in thermoplastic elastomers. I'm not talking about vulcanized, those are different discussions, but here's when policy has to be very aware of the technicalities of how we regulate things, because it sends massive signals to the market. So there are multiple solutions on how to replace fossil-based materials. We do believe that policy can be a big enabler to help create demand. And we really hope that, especially with the Circular Economy Act now coming down the way, we can start reducing the hurdles from the supply side and start creating a demand pool on the consumer side.
Thank you first of all for the very clear explanation, and second for the very clear complaint about what's in the end-of-life vehicles. There is work to be done. I see Sirpa noting very enthusiastically, but it was a very valid point. And the good thing is that at least we all discussing about switching to battery electrical vehicles, but when you talk about bumpers, dashboards, and seats, they all need them. So now from recycling to not using, if I can say that way, to I'm looking for Jeff Townsend, Ecolab, who basically specializes in making us not use water.
Well,
or am I putting that the wrong way?
We want to use water the right way and really put it to work to our advantage. So thank you, Bruno. And thank you, Globee, for this opportunity. Really appreciate this important conversation. For those who don't know, Ecolab is a global sustainability leader with solutions and services that protect people and resources vital for life. And water is indeed central to our purpose. And so I'd like to provide an example of how water enables growth and competitiveness while simultaneously minimizing operational and environmental impacts. And when we talk about economic resilience or climate resilience, that is built on resilient freshwater systems. We see this increasing, and all that means, and of course there's a lot of focus on that at the moment. So our core strategy is to enable our customers across 40 different industries to produce more for less. So more industrial output for less water, less energy, lower emissions, lower waste, etc. But to do that, we need a lot of insights. And it's really, since the last few years, even though I've been in the business 34 years, it's really in the last 2 or 3 years that suddenly we've had insights we just haven't had before. And that's purely because of tremendous growth of digitalization and making sense of data and correlations and such like. And what we see is typically the most energy-intensive industries across Europe, the ones that are target for rapid decarbonisation, are also very water-intensive. And the role of water in these industries is really to transfer and dissipate energy, steam, cooling, and such like. And when you get into the heart of the process, you see lots of little links, production links in the chain. Right? And you can focus on each of those and understand how each one should be performing, but also collectively. So you have subsystem level and then this higher level. If you use digital applications like digital twins to make sense of all those connections and interconnectability, and then ask it 2 questions, and these are the really important questions to ask. How to increase output, production output, for the same operating cost and emissions. And then you want to flip it, how to reduce costs and emissions for the same output. So those become the boundaries, like the bookends. And once we've got those bookends established, we can model or understand anything that exists in between. Right? So, and it's applicable whether you're operating at below capacity or whether you have a mechanical bottleneck. So when we applied this to an ethylene plant, very large petrochemical system, huge energy flow, what we saw was an opportunity to generate $25 million more ethylene for the same emissions and the same cost. So it's a massive step forward, obviously in competitiveness and profitability. Or, again, that flip side, we could have a 9.9% reduction in carbon intensity, which equated in this example to around 40,000 tonnes of CO2 for the same output. So now we have the data, the information, the insights. We need to interrogate that information and ask the right questions to drive to the right conclusions. And we understand very clearly now that water has its greatest value when it's at the heart of production, when it's producing something, and invariably it's transferring energy when it's producing something. So we're very interested in this water energy productivity nexus. And I think we need to add that word productivity in the competitive dimension to water and energy nexus. And then when you look at the EU strategic autonomy, and you look at the rapid growth opportunities that we have before us, data centers, semiconductor industry, we've already mentioned EV batteries, renewable hydrogen and such like, all of those industries are very water intensive and they're very energy intensive. So we really need to double down on these interrelationships. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we need water resilience, freshwater resilient systems. There's never been a more crucial time to explore how water can further enable growth, profitability and competitiveness. The moment you switch from water cooling, for example, to air cooling, invariably you run higher OPEX costs, higher CAPEX costs, much higher emissions, etc., etc. So it's ensuring we have the water for growth enablement that I would like to convey today. So yes, water is very central to what we do.
Thank you very much. And so to our last speaker, Susanne, hang on, we practiced. Durable?
Yes.
Close enough for rock and roll? Yeah.
It goes well.
Okay, I do my best. It's one of the nice things in the European Parliament. You get to learn, practice a lot of pronunciations. But to get to the serious business, representing Rockwool, who are not only consuming energy, helping us save energy, but also very active in recycling at the end of the story. So we're very happy to hear from you where we have not just ambitions, but also results, and where we can help.
Thanks a lot. And as it was a bit more hard for me to bring some product examples, I thought it was easier to just do a slide or two. So thanks a lot. I promised to share a bit about our effort within decarbonization in our company. But first, a bit about who we are. We are a Danish company with more than 80 years experience in producing stone wool products. Our main activity is for fire protection and thermal protection of buildings and industrial installations, but we also have a business within more innovative areas like acoustic sealing, growing media for precision growing in greenhouses. I hope the Dutch people here knows that. And also for cladding systems and more specialized design for vibration and also water management systems. So we do a lot of things, but everything is based on stone wool. And if you change to the next one. Yeah, so we have it's an energy intensive process because what we do is that we melt stone and secondary raw material at very high temperature, at very high volume, and then we create non-combustible and durable products out of it. So of course it requires a lot of energy. And we have worked on our decarbonization strategy or effort the last 20 years, and it's based on 3 pillars. The first one is energy efficiency, technology innovation, and circularity. And the energy efficiency is, of course, very close to our heart. As an energy-intensive industry, we know what it means to save energy. So it's both within our production, it's in our office buildings, and of course it's also in our solutions which we put on the market. Technology innovation, that's where we have focused on replacing the fuel for our melting process. Traditionally, we have been using coke and coal directly into the melting because that have been the most efficient way to melt stones until the time where we have sufficient green electricity in the system. But it's not a small technology shift to do. So over the last 20 years, we have worked on this, and in 2020, we had the first really big step where we moved our Danish factories to run on biogas. And the year after, we opened the world's biggest electrical melter in Norway. And Norway were chosen because it was the place where we had most green energy available. So this year we will be starting the renovation of one of our biggest plants in the Netherlands. And when it opens next year, we will be able to reduce the emissions with 75% simply by changing technology. So from this journey, we are now replacing all our new factories with electrical melters and replacing the existing technology. But of course, those type of innovation, it's both time-consuming, it requires a lot of people, and very big investments. So we can see that the change we did with the biogas in Denmark, it took 10 years of innovation, and I think we had more than 50 engineers on the project for several years, and of course a lot of big investments. So as a company, we have a standing commitment to invest at least 100 million euro per year into decarbonization and sustainability projects. But we can see that it's far from enough. In 23 and 24, we invested in total more than 580 million euro in decarbonization projects. And this is the journey which we are committed to continue, despite Peter didn't favor the long-term commitment. But we are committed to be net zero emission in 2050, and we have a plan now how to get there. So I would say in terms of our biggest challenge, that's really the grid connection, to have a clear process for how to get electricity. The negotiation with the grid companies, it can take, in some cases, on the wrong side of 5 years. And if we don't get access to green electricity, both a stable supply, but also at an affordable price, then we will not succeed in this journey. So we very much hope that this will be a problem which can be solved with the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act. Mm-hmm. On circularity, I think it will be very much a repetition of what you said, Jamina. Our production process is also, I mean, it's an ideal process for a circular economy. We can take back, we can use waste materials, secondary materials from other industries. We can take it back from the post-consumer and just remelt it and use it as a raw material and create new products with the same material. We see that, so we have also developed our own recycling scheme, which is now or very soon operating in close to 30 countries. We see that we are able to take back high volume in countries who have a tradition for separate the construction and demolition waste. In those countries it works. We have very good success in Denmark and Germany and the Netherlands. And in those countries, I mean, we can produce with up to 50% secondary raw materials. And it's not our technology which is the limit. It's really to get the material back to us. So it's the infrastructure. And this is where we need the help from the political system. And we hope that the Circular Economy Act will help address some of those issues.
because we can see that we cannot make a positive business case just by our effort. And items like, for example, a target for closed loop recycling would be helpful. Also, to have better incentives, it could be a ban on materials which can be recycled, or a ban on non-circular practice and things like that. So things which help us to make the business case would be important for us to take the next step.
So we need to help you close the loop.
And to make the business case, because it's not there today.
Thanks for being so clear about it. And for the other point where you mentioned that indeed about the grids, one of my great obsessions, there is indeed no transition without transmission. So it is one of the big things we need to do. And the DSOs would then say, but there's no solution without distribution. But let's not go into that debate. So I was pointed out by Roland-Jan that we are eating into the time for the second panel. So I have room for one question. The one that looks the most enthusiastic gets the chance. I was going to say.
It was mainly in order to answer your last names. To pronounce my last names. My name is Ernest Panagiotopulos. I think for Bruno it's very easy to pronounce.
Well, yes, sort of.
From Indorama Ventures. Indorama Ventures is the largest PET producer and recycler in the world with 117 plants, 38 in Europe. Thank you for the nice panel. I have a question mainly for Dow and Amcor. What do you think about, because we're discussing about resource efficiency, sustainability, but at the end of the day, the customers that we are serving, like the consumers going to the retail, choose the cheapest products. And the cheapest products for the time being is not produced in Europe, for many reasons. So the question to you is how we can square the circle and in order to bring more sustainability, because we are working like second to none in Europe with green energy compared to others who provide cheaper products but with not very green energy from outside. So the question is EU and non-EU. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, which one of you wants to bite? Quick answer.
Well, I think obviously on the one hand, there is, let's say, a certain level playing field. If we talk about, packaging and plastics, there's also the UN Global Treaty, where we hope that also, the EU is a strong driver to support that. I think it was mentioned. I think from energy and from different types of regulation, it was mentioned several times, we need certainty and to plan for that, and then I think one can also adapt to that. I think I can say in packaging is pretty regional, so you wouldn't produce such a pack in China or US and then bring it, for instance, to Europe. The supply chain, just reactivity, it just wouldn't work. So it's relatively, let's say, geographically, like we have now 120 sites in Europe, for instance, alone. So I think you need to be close to your customer, and also food you don't produce at the other side of the world, But I think in the end it was mentioned, energy is definitely a topic, probably more for our suppliers than for us, but obviously then it builds and it affects our raw material costs. I think this transition to renewable energy, specifically electricity, in the end, if you talk about renewable electricity, it's an investment topic. Once you have done that investment, you almost have energy for free. It's just changing the system. I have solar panels at home and a battery, the investment time is probably, payback is something like 10 years. But after that, you have it for free. So I think it's more to have those incentives. If it's 2 or 3 years payback time, and also the banks were mentioned from finance, that's a challenge. So to provide that financial and regulatory certainty.
Yeah, just to complement on my side, I think the issue of competitiveness is not just on the sustainable solutions, like we're facing an issue with competitiveness in all types of industry and traditional types of industry as well. At least for Dow and chemical industry, it's mainly driven by energy costs. And basically this is something where we have, and we've been working on different ways to try to reduce those, but also how policy can help bring those energy prices down. And then I think when we start going into sustainability, that adds a layer of costs for natural consequences of building a new business model. We believe that you need to really have enabling policies to bring costs, to be as cost efficient as possible, especially when we start talking about recycled content, for example, and calculation methods and so on. There's every single decision that is made affects the cost. Then my final point is connected with free and fair trade, especially as we go into things like recycled content and other elements connected to sustainability. Enforcement and control at the border are going to be critical to ensure that we have a fair playing field with imports as well, and ensure that we have credible methodologies to ensure that all the claims are made accurately and we don't face unfair competition from abroad.
Thank you. So a bit of reporting and transparency will help us all. What a great place to end this debate. A great big thanks to my four panelists. I'm very sorry I have no time to thank you more extensively, but we will move out of the way now for the next panel. Thank you very much, and thank you.
I'm really happy to be able to moderate the second panel on fueling innovation, financial support, and scaling up the green startups, because if you don't want to do it for the planet, do it for the money. This is the best business opportunity of our generation. And it's a quote from, no one else than the former director of the EIB. So this is something which obviously is a key thing. And when we heard about the end of the previous panel about the energy prices and kind of the issue that, consumers want cheap products and we have high energy prices. Well, the bad news is, folks, that because we haven't invested, China now has loads and loads of green electricity. And they just, I think in the first quarter, added more solar than the entire installed capacity on the US. That was the first quarter of this year. So, yes, the production capacities of the photovoltaics they have are staggering. And the question is, where can we as a Europe find our competitive niche? It's probably not going to be the production of those photovoltaic panels, honestly, unless we come up with innovation. But we have an incredible amount of interesting startups and scale-ups in Europe, which many of them we see leaving. And part of the reason that I keep on hearing from them is, we have hard time to find the financing. So, enough of me, because it's not about me talking. Exceptionally, but the really important guests. Menno van Dijk from Scale Up Nations, Fritz Bart from the Swiss Family Group, Baptiste Bouet from the InnoEnergy, and Victor van Hoorn from Cleantech for Europe. And I hope I didn't mess up the names too much. So let me start with Menno. And having really interesting background, despite coming from McKinsey, as I say.
Don't hold it against me.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Because I think what you're doing now is really, really important. But tell us about it and tell us where you see the bottlenecks and solutions.
Menno van Dijk, this is the second time I'm coming here to Brussels to the EU. Last time was about 4 years ago. I did a masterclass on scaling companies. As an icebreaker, to make it interactive, I asked at the beginning, can everyone share their most favorite country? Was immediately dead silence. Apparently in the EU you're not allowed to say what your favorite country is. Well, mine is the Netherlands, that's where I was born. Anyway, I spent indeed about 20 years at McKinsey & Company. I was senior partner. As I said, don't hold it against me, but the one thing I learned from it, because I was always working on innovation and tech,
is that, in a way, I think it's a quote from Bob Dylan, who is not busy being born is busy dying. So I've seen more than a fair share of these very large corporates, incumbents, all extremely defensive, all ready to get roasted. And then all of these new companies coming up, and truly exciting. So after the 20 years of McKinsey, I took a year off, built a boat with my dad, and then I started a school. And the school is called Think. And Think was based on the simple principle that my daughter gave me. My daughter is a modern music composer. Anyway, she also has a perspective on other stuff. And she said, well, the future is, first of all, us, Generation Z, Generation Y. We don't come out of bed anymore in the morning to work for anyone, just a simple large corporate. We want to be developing and producing products and services that make the world better, not just less bad. Positive impact. So the second is that needs new solutions, so it needs innovation. Yeah, because the old stuff created the crap. And then thirdly, it needs indeed a money-making model, because anything that doesn't in the end have a healthy return is dependent on a subsidy, and the one thing about subsidies we know is they always end. Yeah, so there's this holy triangle between impact, innovation, and commercial entrepreneurship. And that holy triangle became the basis of Think. Think supports impact-oriented entrepreneurs around the world, to date about 10,000. Now, I then got a new learning in that, and that was that folks that think are typically late 30s, they've got at least 10 years of leadership experience. You would say they know what they do. Still, hardly anyone scales up. And I learned also at McKinsey that only what scales moves the needle on impact. Otherwise, it becomes below critical scale. It doesn't go anywhere. So this was frustrating to me. And so I moved to new leadership to Think, and dedicated myself over the last 8 years on the topic of scaling. So one of my mentors said to me, don't be the next consultant shooting from the hip and say something half smart. Do your research. So I built a database of about close to 1,000 companies in the scale-up phase in Europe, all focused on climate tech, and then asked them everything I learned in business school. So about what strategies do they have, what are they doing in terms of culture, leadership, organization, governance, way of financing, everything. And then I started tracking them. And so lo and behold, over the last 7 years, it started to separate out. And from that, a picture started to emerge about what makes the difference between scaling and stalling, as I call it. And it's, first of all, also in the statistics, it's not that in climate tech we scale with a lower probability than in the US or even China. It's low everywhere. Yeah, but as a class, we are not disadvantaged. And all of the scale-up success factors are within control of the management. So I will say to them all, like, don't plead for better access to capital or whatever, get better plans. And because it's mostly in your own hands. All of that stuff I've done on the Creative Commons. I've supported also on it about 150 companies over the last 5 years. I can testify to how this kind of thinking helps. And so one of my things is like, I'm not going to bore you now with all the detail about how to scale a company, although it's cool stuff. But reach out to me if you want to have database access, insight on scale of success factors, what matters less, etc. And now, in sort of finding this, closing on this quick story, is my belief was always like, okay, if you try to crack the code, based on that you make a difference, de facto, you create a lower risk investment portfolio. So my last step, because I'm getting nearer and nearer to retirement, is to create a fund. So a biodiversity fund to invest in companies in the scale-up phase that are and most of them are, that are relatively asset intensive. So are building first commercial factories, or doing project finance, and helping them getting to higher IRR proposals, and then at the same time having the money available to fund that. I would say all of this stuff is basically developing markets, entrepreneurship, commercial drive, competition games. It doesn't necessarily need an EU. Yeah, but there are a couple of things also that I come across that maybe are more relevant for this audience. One is, and many of the companies I support need to make their money from creating a business case for their customer. It would really help if externalities were priced. Yeah, because then business models become easier. Now we do without. Yeah, so for example, I'm supporting a company that does a direct air capture of CO2. We sell it to greenhouses. For them, it makes their plants grow faster, so it's a business case. It would be nice if there would also be a pricing of taking CO2 out of the air instead of burning natural gas. Yeah. The second thing is, in particular, like if I talk about novel food. So when in novel food, I also support a couple of companies. You're introducing something new that is food, or it's a fertilizer, etc. It needs to go for a very strict certification process. And the bar on that should be extremely high because we're talking food. Well, why does it need to take so long? Yeah, why can we not put a little bit more money in the EU on these certification institutes to move like at speed time 10 or something? So it doesn't take 3 years, but say 3 months. It's very little money to properly fund those kind of organizations. I think the final thing is back to champions. I once did, actually, that's a very long time ago, a piece of research while I was still at McKinsey for the EU, and we looked at champions in every member state. All of them had had some backing from their country. And we also all know about Silicon Valley. It was started on defense contracts, so there's nothing bad about that. Yeah, so in your own countries, pick the ones and propel them forward. It's sometimes frustrating that you need to work so hard when you've got something cool to incrementally grow by getting 5 million here, 10 million there, instead of getting the backing of, say, a couple of billion contracts. That's my long story.
Thank you very much. I'm always struggling now commenting on things, but since we're really late, let me hand over to Fritz Bart from the Swiss Family Group.
Yes.
So money. Are you writing signing the checks, or can people come to you and?
Well, Switzerland is normally money, yes.
Yeah.
But I tell you, the money in Switzerland is extremely conservative.
So that's why it's so great to have you here, because the big question is how we can get the money in Switzerland to basically make more money on the good things.
But transferring money out of Swiss banks is already a challenge. Yeah. But the Swiss Family Group is a multi-family office, 7 families, investing in all traditional things and trying out also venture now. But my responsibility, I'm in the board, is the impact investment side, also in clean tech. And as Peter Packer said, the wind is blowing against us. It's also, it was 2 years ago. It was a nice, good start. Yeah, everybody is very interested in clean tech, green tech. Yeah, we want to make a better world. In particular, the young people in family offices, the next generation is very interested in that. But it ends very soon when it comes then to put the money there. Yeah, then they are extremely conservative because they see the very high risk. And they very often, I deal with that. I have to put investment proposals, and then you see, when it comes to concrete, then the wind blows against you at the moment, because the whole discussion which is against sustainability in public doesn't help. Investors shy immediately away. Investors are not logic. Investors are like a herd. Yeah, everybody went away from real estate. Now the swing is going back. Now they are all going back into real estate. Yeah, they are like a herd. And that's one of the problems, you know. Fact-based decision making is not the strongest bit. Yeah, of course there are long sustainable due diligence reports, but who reads them? Yeah, at the end of the day is here very often. Yeah, the decision, and what is very much the wind against us is at the moment. Well, family offices normally said, yeah, no defense, no defense. Defense we don't do, no. But now it's the opposite. Under the carpet, of course, not to the outside. Give us good defense proposals. That's what everybody wants now, because there they see the growth. Yeah, clean tech, very interesting, but is there growth? Yeah. And then what you also see, well, I'm very critical with my own constituency now, but that's the reality when you work with them. And when you see also, are they really interested in scaling, or are they not interested in a good exit? Yeah, so these are questions, you know, what you have to look at. I recently met, for example, a good biotech company, congratulated the CEO, said, well, you just made an 80 million euro round. Great. Oh, he said, oh, I leave the company. I said, why? Yeah, we have to go to the US. He's a US investor. And it came out of German research, yeah, German startup support, and then, of course, when it comes to the bigger investment rounds, then, of course, shoop, gone. Yeah, and that is, of course, still, well, everybody knows that this is the reality. What is also one of the hurdles is, of course, well, which we don't feel that much, but they tell us all the time is that, of course, the different regulations in the different member states, when you have a product, large companies, no problem, but if you are new in the market, not easy to handle. The US market is, of course, much bigger without the same regulation. That's of course the thing. Then when you look at financing, well, if I look back, I'm a German. If I look back 30, 40 years ago, of course, a lot of the SMEs were financed by the banks. Yeah, local banks. This is over. Banks don't go into venture finance anymore. They're not allowed to. Very difficult. Specialized banks, yes. Yeah, they do, they still do. But the normal, local bank, which normally did it, where the guy knew the father, and then he said, of course, you get 2 million. Yeah, I know you. That doesn't happen anymore. The Basel regulations have brought down the banking system very, very low. Of course, everybody thinks the private capital market step in, but this will not happen that easy because private capital markets work in a bit different way. Yeah, short term. That is also what Peter said. Another problem what we spot is, the advice when startup scale-ups, when most of the time scale-ups, when they come to us, when we see what advice they have received, is very often bad. They come from accelerators, from there, from that. There is no high quality of advice in Europe. The best one I know is Menno, because he has quantitative data and he has a lot of experience. But what you realize is then an advisor advising startups. He never made an own company, so the blind is advising the depths. Yeah, and that is that is what we see. So that a quality system in Europe, when you do a scaling school or something like that with certificates, yeah, where the people have to go through when they then are used by the EIC or something like that. I think that that would absolutely help, yeah, in that respect. What we try to do is, for example, we are working at the moment with a new fund in Luxembourg. It's a fund based on tokenized assets. It's the first worldwide the first fund on this basis. Why are we going to do this? Because the fund investments are then tradable, which is of course one thing. What families often don't like, they put the money into a fund, or then it's stuck very long time. Yeah. And so this is a new thing what we try out, what we are happy to also bring in the discussion here. What might be, what I want to say with this, we need new instruments. new instruments which are really targeted to the scale-up, let's say, finance. Yeah. And well, it's possible. I was part of the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, which is what started by the European Commission. I was part of the team who won the fund from the EIB. That was a good attempt, yeah. But more like that has to be done, yeah. Absolutely more. And well, we are happy to bring in, let's say, expertise into that. And one thing I want to say at the end is, one problem we have, the entire European education system is teaching the people to become employees. It's not teaching them to become entrepreneurs. And there the problem starts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to pick up on one of the many points you raised, and that's because one hears, oh, we have too much EU regulation, where in reality what we have is member states
that's the problem.
Putting up barriers. So that kind of, everybody talks Draghi.
It's not the EU regulation.
No, we should be talking letter report. It's the 40%, according to the IMF data, 40% tariffs on goods and 120% tariffs on services that are just due to the incredible regulation and breaks in the single market that the member states put up. And I think this is the story that's not said enough, because it's not something that the member states want to hear. With that, I'm going to hand over to... no, there you are. Baptiste Bouet from the InnoEnergy, who is also among those who hand out money, try to help to scale up the clean tech companies. So I wonder what your take is. Where are the challenges and where are the solutions?
Thank you, Martin. Thanks everyone for having me. Great to be here. We do not hand money; we invest. We are a climate tech investor, and as you said, we do it for the return, of course. But we are an impact investor created under the premises of the European Union, and so we do it for CO2 abatement, we do it for jobs creation, we do it for growth in Europe, and we do it for resilience as well, because we are specializing in investing in climate tech made in Europe. So what we do is to try to industrialize climate tech innovation in Europe. So this is what we do, and this is what we've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. We have 160 companies in portfolio now. So it's one of the largest clean tech portfolio in Europe for sure. Sorry, it's we've got Sorry. So we've got 160 companies, startups and scale-up in portfolio today. Focus on clean tech, as I said. Also, a lot of efforts we're doing in batteries across the value chain, in solar across the value chain, but also in hard-to-abate industries. Steel, fertilizer. We're trying to create those champions that will need some backing indeed when there is scale and before there is scale. To give a bit of color, when we're talking scaling up this type of project, we're talking extremely capex intensive projects. Extremely capex intensive. If you want to build a battery gigafactory, 15, 20 gigawatts, it's 2-3 billion euros that you need in capex. If you want to build a solar PV cells and modules manufacturers, it's another billion that you need. If you want to build a green steel or green iron plant in Europe, it's another 3 billion. And it's not one that you need if you are to meet the targets that we set ourselves. It's many more, and it's across those value chains. So it's a huge investment challenge that we have to meet and we deliver on this investment. Our portfolio alone, the 160, if they are to industrialize themselves by 2030, they need 160 billion euros. 160 billion euros. Our portfolio alone. So it's a challenge. I was once in a panel and I heard it's a sprint, it's a 100 race, but it's also a marathon. And I think it says it quite well. You need access to fast money, then you need to cross industrial challenges, and then you survive long term in a competitive world. Competitive world. So this is where we are. The main challenge. So we are at a very early stage, those companies, and we bring them to scale. And the main challenge we see is gross equity. It's not the small tickets. The VC community, I heard in previous panels, or the VC, market is okay.
Yes.
You can find the money. But as you said, Fritz, getting to the large tickets, we're talking 100 million euros, maybe more in much bigger rounds, is very difficult.
That's the difficulty, yeah.
And what we see is that in our portfolio, reaching this scale was always with the support of global money, not European money. If you take gigafactories, if you take green steel plants, if you take other projects, it's always the Temasek, the Macquaries, the Goldman Sachs that come in. So what do you derive from that? It's I would say, good and bad news. The good news is that the European market is attractive. The pipeline is attractive to global money. Still.
Yeah.
Still. And the window of opportunity may be quite short. The bad news is, of course, that if European money does not invest in those strategic projects, early stage, then Europe loses the control and, as you say, Fritz, risks that those projects delocalize and industrialize elsewhere. So this is really what we need to solve, create a structural solution for large, growth equity tickets in Europe. So there are some efforts being done today. We've read with some interest the startup and scale-up strategy. There is this Scale-up Europe Fund that was announced. Still pretty uncertain, but to our reading, also unlikely to reach the volume that we need. If the Scale-up Europe Fund reach 310 billion euros, it would be a huge success, but it's nowhere near what we need. And so also earlier in the event, there was a discussion on even questions on, can we attract pension savings insurances into these risky phases of the project? The answer is not should we or could we. We must. Because this is where European capital is. If we do not put the citizens' money at work for this type of transition, first, we risk failing, and second, they will not ride the upsides. So we need to help this money come into those projects at those early phases that are still risky. The problem is, of course, it's regulation, but it's also governance or investment thesis by those funds and pensions, that they do not have the capacity or the instrument to invest in. So tokenization maybe is a good one. What we think is that we should leverage the EU budget for that, not with grants, but to help such institutional investors invest in bonds that are dedicated to investing in those projects. And the bonds would be guaranteed. It's a very effective way to use the budget and attract a lot of capital into those projects that today they don't do. That's the first thing. I said there was a good news that the market is still attractive. We believe so, and we keep investing and we keep pushing our project to scale, to industrialize across Europe in value chains that are challenging at the moment: batteries, solar, steel, fertilizers. But if we do this, and any impact investor will probably confirm that, it's because Europe is quite unique in regulatory stability long term. If we lose the stability in sustainability ambition 2050, 2040, 2030, you do not get investors to come to Europe anymore, European or global. Because the project we're discussing, they are long term. They will start producing 2-3 years' time for about 20-30 years. So today they're startup scale-ups, tomorrow they're infrastructure. And so we need the long-term stability in the ambition to be able to unlock the investors' money. And this is extremely critical. And to close on that point, because I don't want to be too long, there is other signals that are needed. It's signal for the offtake. Because we've discussed a lot about bringing equity into the project. We soon need to bring the lenders. We need to bring debt as revenues become possible for those projects. And this will not happen without offtake. And so anything that Europe can do to credibilize offtake with a premium by European off-takers, OEMs, corporates, has to be done. And so we need to be innovative also in the types of support we provide to off-takers and to manufacturers so that they meet and partner.
Thank you. It was actually interesting to hear German nodding to join that. This is quite unusual. But
I'm not German. I'm not a German member. Come on.
Sweet German potato. Same conservatives. No, but I think this is. But I think this is something which, and it's really important element here is, it's about investment, not spending, and I think this is something which is often forgotten. And it's not about handing out money; it's about investing. So it's about making money, and this is a huge difference, which I think is often forgotten. And the European setup has been always, well, let's subsidize, and let's be honest, a large chunk of the EU budget is spent on subsidies. 3 letters start with C. And this is something where, how much sustainable is that in the long run? And what we need here is really finally do the capital investments union and make sure that we can actually get the money, not to make money on Wall Street, but to make money in Europe. That's part of the things we have. And maybe Trump with its current policies might be helping us if we are able to seize the opportunity. But again, I'm talking too much. Victor, as the advocacy director for the clean tech, from what you heard, can you reflect on it on how the clean tech sector sees it?
Sure, and absolutely. And by way of background, so Clean Tech for Europe, we were started 4 years ago, and we're an advocacy organization bringing together both a coalition of 23 companies that are all in the clean tech sector scaling up, so facing really that scale-up challenge that actually Baptiste described quite eloquently, and an investor coalition bringing together 30 venture capital and private equity funds who have clean technologies in their investment mandate. But maybe first of all, to respond to your point, Martin, I think it's always good to start with the bigger picture. When you said, the behavior of member states, I had the pleasure at the beginning of the year to be at an event where Mario Draghi was again presenting his report. And he got asked the question is, how do you fund the 800 billion that I've identified? And I think he gave us a perfect answer, which was, if we break down the single market, we're fundamentally improving the business case for a lot of companies. And as a result, the amount of public money we will need will be less. So there is a communicating gap between getting the single market done and how much public money you will need to de-risk and subsidize. I think that's good. I think from a macroeconomics perspective to keep that in mind. I think, just if you take, for example, clean tech, which is a very broad concept, but in the context of really clean energy technologies, the IEA, International Energy Agency, only 2 weeks ago said there's a €3.5 trillion market opportunity in the next decades to grab. And the question is, who will grab it? And right now, clearly, China has a head start. As Martin, you said, I think there was a great piece in the New York Times today putting that in context, where they are and where we are. I think it's good to have that reality. I won't repeat everything Baptiste said, but I can say 100% agree, and I completely share his diagnosis, so I won't repeat that. But I think really to build actually on your story of, what does success look like in the next couple of years? Actually, it's what I would say it's called graduation, where we gradually move from this equity question, and what you alluded to is we move gradually to mature business models, mature technologies. We unlock access to bank lending. We unlock access to infrastructure finance. Why? Because the cost of capital is much lower there than if you raise equity. You are not, I think, going to be able to build all those technologies if you rely on equity the whole time. Yes. So I think that's the first thing to bear in mind is it's economics. It's economics and finance, and we need to understand that if we want to crack this equation. But then comes to my second macro point, is if you want to attract debt, project finance to the table, you have to have clarity on the business model. You have to have clarity on the demand signals. And I think here I will make a plea is that I currently, with all the efforts we've done in the last couple of years, I still don't think we have a coherent industrial policy when it comes to clean technologies.
We don't.
And what I mean by that is, just if you take, for example, we set ourselves in the Net Zero Industry Act the objective of having by 2030 40% of clean tech manufactured in Europe. Across all clean tech manufacturing value chains, there's one elephant in the room right now. It's China. Those technologies, they can offer them at a discount which is enormous on solar PVs, on batteries, on wind turbines, on long duration energy storage. You see the same picture with different levels of intensity, but you see the same picture. And what you're really seeing, I think, is that actually that we're struggling to, at least parts of this town is struggling to update the mindset for the new geopolitical reality. And I can give you one example. It's been in the press and we've been quite vocal. Only recently, Commission had to adopt new state aid rules under the Clean Industrial Deal. They will not touch what we call production-based support, which is something that was done in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, which we know is it's not about the amounts, but it's the type of support, how it works, how it attracts capital. They don't want to do it because it's not allowed under the treaties and because it distorts the single market. But the result is that we have a competition policy that is stuck in the software of the 20th century and is not facing the reality of the 21st century. It is the same on trade. I was at the roundtable this week where a think tank launched a report. If you look at the global map of how many countries have introduced local content requirements for their clean technologies and are not ashamed of that, we're the last bit on the map, which is still like, there's something like the WTO and we want to fully respect that. But the fact is the other parts of the world are not playing by those rules anymore. And why I'm saying that is if you look at the last couple of decades, it's I think what they teach you in business school and economics is if you want to have a nascent industry, you want to grow it, it will need a domestic market where it can compete, where it has safety to grow, to reach that scale, lower the marginal cost, and have a chance of competing internationally. Currently, we're not giving ourselves the tools of the ambitions. The Net Zero Industry Act is, for me, it's a racket full of holes. We say that we only want European preference or resilience criteria, as we call them, when we're dependent on one country. We only want to do it if it doesn't cost us 20% more or 50% more. This is not the start of getting us to a coherent answer. So I think we have a very important choice. And I think also we know that we will probably not afford to be able to do that across all technologies. So I think we have to be smart. We have to decide which are the technologies where we have a chance. And I think also another thing that we need to bear in mind is also we now live in the age of security. I think we're becoming increasingly aware that security has to be taken into account in our decisions. And I think, really see that what happens to a country when there's a blackout on your electricity grid, as we know that we will need to electrify our economy, we need to ask ourselves which devices we're putting on the grid, where they're made, what technology. I mean, there was a story recently that there's around 200 gigawatt of solar power connected with Chinese inverters to the grid. That software gets updated every 2 weeks on the cloud in China. And we might have the same situation soon on energy storage, where we have to stabilize our grid. So I think we really need this update, because what I mean by that is if we don't have those demand signals, if we don't have clear visibility on the market, what certainly I'm hearing from large institutional investors and banks is they don't see it and they will not come. And you can, to your point, we need this savings and investment union or capital markets union. You can have the best savings and investment in capital markets union in the world. You can actually finally succeed where we've not succeeded in the last 10 years. But if you don't solve the demand and industrial policy side, I'm afraid the capital will just not follow. You'll have capital a little bit cheaper, but they will still not see the business case. I think it's really important for us that you think of whether we actually collectively think and decide where do we want to go. And as I said in my question to the gentleman who did opening remarks, you see that trade. You're going to see that trade-off everywhere between do we want to be only deployers of the technology at the cheapest possible price, or are we willing initially to pay the premium to say we want to manufacture something in Europe? And I think these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves and have an answer to very urgently, because the rest of the world is not waiting. So I'm optimistic. I think there's great opportunities in Europe, but I think we need to be aware of the world we live in, and we need to be wide, have our eyes wide open in this world.
Thank you very much. And before I hand over to Sirpa, because due to the delay I should be already 17 minutes in the group meeting for a couple of items, but this was too good to miss. And thank you, Sirpa, for being able to run the discussion part for me. Just 2 remarks. One thing, and this is something I think we need to look at, we need, just like we have the 5G security box, we need the same on the electricity grids. We know those inverters calling home. This is, China has a kill switch to our electricity network at the moment, and this is not And it's something which is going to be used against renewables, let's be honest, it already is. And the second thing is that I think in this debate there is this feeling, okay, you know, so we don't have to do all of this, the clean tech, you know, green ideology craziness, we can go back to the old ways, but forgetting that this is not possible. And actually the question is whether it's going to be made in Europe or others will win the race, because this is something which is like, us saying, you know, 20, 30 years ago, you know, this pesky mobile phones, that doesn't have a perspective. You know, good old trusted landlines. Let's not, we burned ourselves on the 2G or whatever, and it's kind of, we will not going to be allowing this. This is not what we should pursue. We'll stick to the landlines or faxes on the Germans. Sorry. And this is something which is a matter of, as I said at the very beginning, you know, we actually have to do it for the moment, because otherwise the others will do and win the race. So thank you very much. I'm really sorry, I have people following, and I hand over the running of the discussion and the remainder of the really interesting workshop. Silva, thank you. Q&A. We still do short Q&A, or are we going to next one? Just to
very short.
Very short.
Please raise your hands.
One super urgent question.
Can I ask a question about Northvolt? Do you know Northvolt? I think it's a very interesting case because it was investing in battery production in Sweden with subsidies, with support, with all sorts of things going on, and the company had to fold for very unfortunate reasons. Is that a very unusual case? Is it just a bad management? Is it typical of the situation? How could the situation of that have been improved? What could have been done better to make sure that that kind of very useful clean tech production was kept in Europe and continued?
Can I say one thing on that quickly? I think in general, 1 out of the 10 scales, and maybe if you do everything right, your residual risk is probably still around 50%. Yeah, we're talking about tech entrepreneurship. It's as cool and exhilarating as it gets, but this is a high-risk class. Yeah, and learning a lot from the one failure, it's more like, okay, how can we quickly restart or get the people from it onto the next venture? It's all about a learning economy, more than one that protects everything from failure. It's about propelling them forward instead of protecting them. I'm also not a big fan of local protected markets. Like, get them out there in the rain as quickly as possible, but also resource them aggressively.
As an investor in Northvolt, we were one of the founding investors there in 2017, and we still invested there. So I cannot comment to a level of details, but we've learned the hard way. You mentioned a lot of public backing that they have received. I contest that. What do they get? What did they get in Sweden? Not a lot. They get a lot in Germany. But the industrial scaling difficulty that they faced was in Sweden. And I think they're learning the hard way, as any Chinese battery manufacturer have learned the hard way, with a lot of support. And therefore was able to succeed in the first place. And Europe, in a way, did not leave that chance to Northvolt. So
that's the point. What do we need to do to make these future ones successful?
I would say policy continuity and help them. I think I find it staggering that we always cite often Airbus as an example. It took 30 years and 0.35% of EU GDP in subsidies to get Airbus to where it is now. And it's also a capex intensive, manufacturing intensive industry. I'm not saying that it's as complex to produce batteries than an aircraft, but I think it's a good benchmark of what it took to achieve that. And I think that we should be always reminiscent of that.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, without the joint effort, we never got any competing parts to Boeing. So that's the point, what we would need to learn from there. So welcome, Melanie, and we'll start the panel with you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you've given any introduction, but we're talking about competitiveness and resource efficiency and all those topics around digital technologies and AI. And probably to start with, I'm speaking for Deutsche Telekom. I'm heading the corporate responsibility department, but I'm also a vice chair of JESSI, an organization who is pretty active around Brussels and talks a lot about how we optimize and how we enable more digital technologies and how we sort of create better transparency together with the help of the the institutions of the European Union on how to create the transparency on where the digital enabling is. And probably to start with how we're looking at this, I think competitiveness and efficiency is a big theme, and we can see that it's not just about the studies that we read that show that between 10 and 20% of efficiency can easily be achieved with the right set of AI. So we've seen the studies around the globe on certain cases. We do see this at DT as well. When we look at energy efficiency in the network, where we, for example, use sleep cell mode that driven by AI steers the frequency and the load in the network, depending on whether antennas are in use or potentially in use or not, we can see savings of up to 15% easily to be achieved. And I think that's a significant contribution to our cost base, because for a telco, energy is one of the key cost drivers. So it creates a level of competitiveness as well, because we also have to compete on cost, not just on good products and quality. So this is where AI really can help a lot. And we do see the same, by the way, in data center operation, when it's about using AI for smart technologies, smart cooling, efficiency steering of the data center grid, same thing. And we do see a lot of side effects in the service transformation by using chatbots, by using AI for internal process optimization. So a lot is going on there. So those studies somehow seem to be true. And that's also what we do see when we look at this, when we discuss this, for example, within JESSI, within our membership. However, there is one sort of drop of water into the wine to that story. And that's the cost also of AI and modern technologies when we look at the energy hunger and the resources that need to be put together. Just to cite a few things, and I'm sure you looked at this today. There is one side who says that AI can save a lot of energy, and AI potentially can save 4% of global emissions in agriculture and production and so on. At the same time, pretty recent studies say that AI data centers can lead to being up to 4% of the global emissions. So if that's the case, the equation is zero, but ideally it should be positive. So it should bring more than it costs us. And that means as a company, on a company level, and we've done this, for example, for DT, but also on the industry-wide level and across industries, we have to think about how do we come to green principles for AI. We've done our share by designing some of these green principles, which are open for sharing as well. And they look at all stages of the selection and design through the operation, through creating transparency and partnering with others. And those principles always have in line or always have as an aim to create the most applicable efficiency level while not giving up the functionality of AI, not giving up the use case why we want to go into AI. So to bring this together. That, however, now requires a lot of governance to implement it. And that's, for example, where we are, and where also I think we need to collaborate much stronger with each other in that area to provide us with a way to integrate it into our systems, to talk and exchange best practices on how we can set up the governance model that everyone can take informed decisions on selecting the right AI. Everyone can create transparency on what is the cost of AI when I look at social, when I look at environment, for example, and how can I relate this back to the use case. So for that, I think we need to talk more than we do today. So at DT, we started this. Within Jesse, we're looking at this, not just within the European Green Digital Coalition, where we look at specifying the enablement factor of our industry, but also in specific AI projects. How can we make this tangible? How can we work on that standardization together? Because I think this is also something that I believe we need to look at when we look at regulation, also voluntary joint standardization to drive this forward. And then we can harvest again a lot of the good things. Yeah, where I'm with the other panelists, I'm sure every one of us can share great applications on where, for example, AI can do a lot on climate adaptation, whether it's weather forecast prediction. We're offering wildfire detection tools, groundwater monitoring tools for cities to become smarter, specifically in areas where groundwater is really, really an issue. And what I have to say, what I liked a lot, it's not a showcase by DT, but I liked a lot the use case of Microsoft with Aurora when they forecasted the typhoon Doksuri and where it might land up. And they were able 4 days in advance to tell that it will hit the Philippines and not Taiwan as all the others models forecasted. And that gave the society there 4 days more to prepare. I mean, that's a massive advantage when it comes to climate adaptation. And this is exactly, I think, where I can help a lot. However, probably to close my part, we should not forget one thing. Beside all those standards and voluntary guidelines, we also need to think about the employees and the leaders within corporations. We need a lot of training. People need to understand what AI is about on the positive and on the negative side. And they need to understand not just what it means for each and every workplace. We also need to train people more so that we can harvest the good advantages of AI even better, so that people start actively thinking about where AI can be of help for the individual workplace position. And yes, companies also have a certain responsibility in retraining when jobs are made redundant because AI in certain areas might take over. So also that side of thing, the workplace side of thing, the employer perspective, I think, is an important one. And having said all that, I probably stop here so that we can have some more time and room for the other panelists.
Thank you, Melanie, very much from your points to the panel and raising of 3 important points at least. One is that we need to, in the future, better measurements of the trade-offs. You might increase the energy consumption, CO2 and others in one field, but if you decrease, lower the impact in some other, it's worth doing. But if you don't measure it, we do not know what we are doing. And training and education on AI is very valid point. And as we know, and I'm very great to have the panelists, the digitalization is a huge challenge by energy consumption. When it comes to other parts, of course, the and other materials, but it is a great possibility for sustainability, and I personally think we can't survive without it. So let's try to see how we get best incentives to get the best part of it. And with these words, Wilma, to you, what the Google is thinking and what you are thinking.
Absolutely. So thank you. At Google, we are an AI-first company, so we're obviously very optimistic about the potential of digital and specifically AI to support Europe's competitiveness, productivity, and improve standards of living. We published a study recently that showed that generative AI alone, which is only a subset of AI, can help grow Europe's GDP by 1.2 trillion by 2030 and increase productivity by 1.4%. But at the same time, there is also tremendous potential of AI to support Europe's decarbonization objectives. The International Energy Agency published a report recently which found that AI can help unlock efficiencies and optimizations that are 3 to 4 times more than the total data center emissions. And maybe I can share a couple of examples as well in terms of how we make this tangible at Google. I think a big area, and was mentioned a lot today, was the electricity grid, and there's lots of potential there for AI to optimize Europe's electricity systems. We have Tapestry. This is a tool that helps model scenarios up to 20 years in the future and even carry out hourly scenarios and run 30 different scenarios in parallel. And this is really important if you want to model what would be the impact of incorporating renewables or removing a coal plant from the electricity grid, or what would be the impact of an extreme weather event onto renewables and the grid. And we've already leveraged this in Chile, and most recently we announced a partnership with the biggest electricity grid in the US, PJM. Another example is Solar API. So this is a tool that leverages satellite imagery to identify in a certain area what is a solar rooftop potential, to really help identify where solar panels could be placed and even at which angle, so that they can be getting the most sunlight to be the most efficient. And also building on Melanie's point on weather forecasting. So we have a tool which is publicly available. Everyone can access it. It's called Flood Hub, which can help predict riverine floods up to 7 days in advance, which, again, building on Melanie's point, can really help give the lead time that you need to prepare for the effects of these extreme events. But while AI has significant potential to support on decarbonization efforts, we should really focus also on minimizing the environmental footprint of AI. This is really top of mind at Google. We put a lot of emphasis on efficiency and energy efficiency. Our data centers are some of the most energy efficient in the world. A data center at Google today is able to deliver 6 times more compute, so more work with the same amount of energy as 5 years ago. And these efficiencies keep improving. This is partly because we focus a lot on how we design our chips, like we call them tensor processing units. This is where we train our AI models. And our latest TPU is 30 times more energy efficient than the first generation, which was from 2018. So very rapid efficiencies, very quickly. And we also put a lot of emphasis on our models and how we design our models to be more energy efficient. At the same time, and I don't know if Peter is around, we also have set some ambitious goals on decarbonizing our operations and our value chain by 2030. This is really helping us drive action, so we take this extremely seriously. And a big part of those goals is also operating our data centers on 24/7 carbon-free energy. So really moving away from matching our annual electricity with renewable energy, which we already do for the last several years, but really matching on every hour of the day on the grid where we operate. And maybe just as a final thought, while all these advancements that we are making, I think, are really important as an industry, we really need bold policy action to support this, to really harness the potential that AI has to drive competitiveness and decarbonization. That's why we also recently published a policy white paper. It's called the AI Opportunity for Europe's Climate Goals, and it really focuses on showing 3 main policy ideas on how Europe can harness the potential of AI. And it focuses on 3 pillars. The first one is, how do you enable the critical foundations that you need to develop AI solutions? This includes what was mentioned earlier. It was the skills. You need high quality data, you need digital infrastructure. Beyond that, there is a second pillar, which is focusing on policies that you need to leverage and deploy those solutions, both in the public sector to meet the climate mitigation and adaptation objectives, but also really addressing the hurdles that the private sector is facing to leverage those solutions. And we are focusing specifically on energy, transport, agriculture, and manufacturing as the ones that have the biggest potential from these technologies. And last but not least, how do you guide the sustainable development of AI? And this really focuses on the policies that you need to support the decarbonization efforts of the sector. We are very supportive of the Clean Industrial Deal, the Affordable Energy Action Plan. We think that they can provide the momentum that is really needed to deliver the carbon-free energy that is reliable, affordable, and at scale, and also to enhance Europe's electricity grids to really put that energy and power our digitalized and electrified economy. And maybe I'll pause here.
Thank you, Wilma. Very exciting visions for the future. I especially like the AI for energy. because that could help us with the common, more effective energy network and grids in the Europe. And now we'll move to Diane Mevis from Cisco.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll try to be short because I know that Kurt and I, are really like the blockers between you and the drinks. But, I just wanted, of course, to share a few thoughts. I think, I will repeat a little bit what Melania and also Vilma just said because, we share a lot, honestly, in common when it comes to AI and digital technologies and their potential. We are also part, of JZ, we're part of the Green Digital Coalition, and we really want, to make sure that we scale the objectives there, the KPIs, the metrics, the solutions, and really to help, all the industries to really succeed the net zero transition. So for those who don't know Cisco, well, we are actually one of the products of Cisco here. I didn't come with it, but you are here, on WebEx. Melanie is there. So we are a global technology company. We have been there for 40 years now, also the same amount here in Europe, actually, where we really specialize in everything that is related to networking, to cybersecurity, and to collaboration solutions like WebEx, for example. And really our purpose is really to securely connect people, devices, and system, and make sure, of course, that we help others, along the way, notably when it comes to the energy efficiency challenge. And so this is why whenever we design our products and our solutions in mind, we always think about how much, we can help in terms of cutting the energy consumptions of our product. This is not only important for us, but this is also important for partners and customers, like, for example, Deutsche Telekom. We really want to make sure that they also succeed their net zero transition. And so this is why we keep that very much top of mind. Then when it comes to AI and digital technology, 3 things. Obviously, AI is enabling a lot of different, cases and different, opportunities. I would like to focus on 3. The first one is obviously, AI and energy consumption. So how to make sure that we really put in place the right IT, notably, for example, you were mentioning data centers, Vilma, just a few minutes ago, to make sure that we help people to really reduce their energy consumption, but also to cut costs. Because this is also, something that we have seen over the past years. The energy costs are so expensive. We really have to make sure that when we look also at reducing energy consumptions, we also help, our customers to reduce their cost as well. And so this is something that we did, for example, with Bosch in Germany for their model factory. And so one of the things that they wanted to do, in line also with the European regulations, obviously we have now the Energy Efficiency Directive. They have really strong objectives in place, and so they really wanted to make sure that they could have solutions that will help them to track their energy consumption in everything related to their IT and OT operations. And so we developed for them, we really co-created actually solutions where they have like real insights about the exact consumptions of energy that they have, across all their operations. And thanks to that, they managed to reduce not only 20 to 25% of the cost of energy, but they also managed to reduce 25 to 30% of the greenhouse gas impact. So I think this is really something that we have to take into account. And this was all, leveraging AI and data. This is really where, it makes a difference. Coming back to what Peter was saying, we really have to make sure that we leverage much more the data. The second thing is what AI can do in terms of bringing energy security. Energy security is economic security for the European Union. We have to make sure that we look at that. It's a key objective of the EU. It's a key objective of NATO. And AI can actually really manage energy demand and also integrate diverse sources, And so this will be something that will really help EU to cut dependencies on Russia and on other third countries. So this is really another interesting case of AI. And then the final one, coming back to what we were saying just in the panel before, how to make sure that we give the European industry a proper edge when we look at China, for example. We know that China obviously has already many energy efficient manufacturing plants. I think if we better leverage AI, and there are many initiatives now we can think of the AI gigafactories, apply AI strategy, the Cloud and AI Data Act that will come later on. We have to make sure that we leverage this different initiative in coherence with the ESG landscape to make sure that industry can really seize this opportunity. This is really the momentum. Right now, we have to do that. So how to get there? And so these are, just a few policy recommendations. There are many, but I would like just to focus on a few, and they have been actually, for many, been said by Vilma and also by Melanie. So the first one is we have already a lot of strategies and big plans, for example, the clean industrial deals and on. I think what Peter and others said is that, great, we have those strategies. Now, how can we come to action? Really concrete action. We have, all these technologies that are there, but how can we make sure that we push the industry, that we push, others to really seize this opportunity? And here, governments and also European institutions can actually lead by example and show also that they trust the technology, that they leverage that to modernize the infrastructure, to modernize the network and so on, and to really show that this technology actually works, that it helps, to reduce cost, and that it helps also to meet their net zero targets. Then partnerships, obviously, the Jay-Z, the Green Digital Coalition, everything, that we can do together. I think, if we are alone, we will not go very far, but if we are all together, it can definitely make much more impact. And then finally, we will have normally this month the first proposal of the multi-annual financial framework. This is going to be very important. I know that public funding is not the only solution. Obviously, private funding has a lot to play, and, companies have also a very important role. But still, what we have seen a few years ago was that the green and digital transition was top of mind for the European Union. Right now, it's more defense. But let's remind ourselves that, again, energy security is also part of economic security. So we have to make sure that we keep that top of mind. It's just the beginning. The clean transition, is just starting. So we have to make sure that we also dedicate a very important part of this multi-annual financial framework to this clean transition. And then with that, I would like just to make sure that we can continue the discussion because, again, I think it's just starting. So I hope that we will have many other possibilities of continue this discussion.
Thank you, Vilma. Diane, and putting it back to the feet, how to come to action. I took quite a number of notes of that, so let's come back on that in a minute. And now, Kurt, please.
Yes, thank you. And I'm representing here Kindrill, which is a young startup, so you might not really know the name, but we are the world's largest IT manufacturer, supporting a company to other big firms like banks, insurance companies, medical sector, you name it, right? We are doing the IT critical infrastructure that we support to them, right? You think about, as we already mentioned, data centers. So no doubt that's as well that also from our side, and I think Peter has mentioned it and Geoff has mentioned it and others, like the importance of data is of course key to this decarbonization agenda, right? The more data we have, the more insights we can have from those data in order to help reducing the emissions in other sectors. Why are we saying that? Well, we have built a solution internally to help our customers reduce their emissions. So the customers in the banking, insurance, medical sectors and others, right? And which is called Bridge. So Bridge is our IT platform from which we serve our customers. And as we have direct insight from all of the server storage network equipment that we support worldwide in more than 60 countries, more than 250 data centers, we have a wealth of data that we can use to directly help our customers in understanding their own carbon footprint on real-time data, right? And we have therefore been integrating our, into Bridge, we have been integrating three key things. Our people who have the knowledge, the data inside, the data that we have from all this direct connection to all this equipment, and thirdly, we have then rolled out the AI capabilities on it together, right?
So building in that into Bridge delivers us to have 12 million insights every month on how to improve with our customers, right? So of course we likely can't roll out all of the 12 million insights, but that's where we go, of course, in a dialogue and where we co-create with our customers to improve their efficiencies both into their IT infrastructure, but likely we can also do that outside by deploying these insights, data insights for other sectors. We lately rolled out, for example, a AI-driven capability in India, where we are helping a plastics manufacturer to have insights and to help them to become more resource efficient into their processes. The same is true also in other domains. Not only the resource efficiency is key, energy efficiency was already mentioned by Wilma and Diana and Melanie, but also safety issues, right? I mean, if you can use virtual techniques to help people that are not wearing their helmets in construction sites to have an immediate alert, I mean, this can save lives, right? We've heard other examples from Melanie on where you can predict and so on. So all of the data insights are very, very key, and I think all of our companies play a critical role on that. So then getting, of course, into the policy domain, I think Diane mentioned, she made up the entire list of things already, so I'm not going to repeat those, Sylvain, but I think it's key that we need to embrace the technology. I also think, referring back to the panel on investments, one thing that we did lately, last year, so very recent I would say, we invested in a new AI hub in Liverpool, UK, where we will give job to about 1,000 high-tech engineers and very trained IT people that will help us to roll out AI, right? So there again, I mean, the financing is an important piece of it, where we might need support. The policy is a key thing where we should embrace the technology. And at the same time, and I think that's my concluding remark, it's also key that we responsibilize the companies that use AI, right? How can we do that? Well, each of us should have a strong own governance and a strong responsible AI policy that helps us in doing the right thing here, right? To consider things likely beyond the environmental and sustainability part, because and that's what we do with the internal governance board. We put multidiscipline people together to go over each case that we want to deploy with the customer, right? So to make sure that we also take, for example, social aspects into account. We already talked about education, training, skilling up people, workforce, all of that are all very key aspects as well in the rollout of AI. So with that, I think I just can link up to my previous panelists and give the word back to you, Sirpa.
Thank you very much. Good, and bringing back from Peter's point of how important the knowledge and data is, and the more we know, the better we actually act, and that is maybe the biggest part of the challenge. Now there's a quick possibility for one question, if just wanted to try to squeeze a bit of time for that, if anyone.
Megan here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I asked the question again, but I wanted to, very interesting question, I wanted to ask a question which I hope brings together some of the other panels as well, and that relates to the commitments that most of the member states, well, all the member states who are members of NATO have, most of them have made to increase defense spending. Isn't this a great opportunity, unfortunate, but great opportunity for us to use public funds to increase digitalization, increase sustainability, improve the way we invest also in Europe, and make sure that this investment doesn't go straight to the unnamed man in North America, but is used here. I mean, this is apparently one of the areas where we're going to be making more public investment. So let's put it to our very best use. Do you see ways in which we can use the technology best?
So how do you see it? I'll start the panel here, and Melanie can comment after a while, if that is okay. Who wants to start? Is that an opportunity, or how could we seize it to be an opportunity?
I'm happy to respond, but I don't know if Melanie, wanted to. I don't know if she's online still.
I can go. Diane, go first.
Okay, sure. So yeah, clearly, I think there's a clear opportunity right now. One of the things that I just hope the European Commission and member states will work on is to make it much more accessible, to SMEs, the thing is, what we hear also from small companies that are our customers and our partners here in the European Union is that it was so hard for them to grasp, for example, a part of the resilience and recovery funds. Sometimes it's extremely burdensome, and so I really hope that when we look at how to make it easy also to gain a competitiveness edge, to make sure that they can better leverage AI and digital technology, also in line with the digital decade targets, and of course what we want to do with defense, that we will make it also much more easier, in the process for getting these funds, honestly. But I definitely think there's a huge opportunity, and we have to make sure that policymakers will shape it in the best way, so everyone can really, everyone here in Europe can really grasp it, to make sure that we have economic security here.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I don't know, Melanie. I didn't realize you were looking at me or Melanie.
I can just add to what Diana said. The burdensome process is definitely an issue that we as a corporation also would love to see some easier processes, better accessibility to funds, because that is not yet in a way that it's really pragmatic. And I have to say, from an economic perspective, we're talking about pragmatical solutions here. We're happy to have guidance and regulation that supports us and gives us a frame, but the operationalization needs to be much more pragmatic in the future. When it comes to specifically harvesting money which is dedicated to defense, I have to say, for sure, this is a citizenship question. And there's a lot of opportunity for our industry, for digital and for AI in there. However, I mean, for us at DT, this is not sustainable. Yeah, defense is not a sustainability topic. It's the other way around. We have to ensure that there is more sustainability in defense applications, but it's not an ESG compliant topic for us. It's really a total different thing. And there's a good reason for going into it. And there's a lot of revenue potential in there for companies and growth potential. But I would never connect it to sustainability, I have to say. We're hoping we don't have many of these defense cases in the future, but if it ever comes to one, this is the opposite of green or social. Yeah, just to be probably on that side. However, yes, less burdensome process, harvesting more of the capital that should be available also through the Green Industrial Deal would be very beneficial also for our topics.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, a very quick thought, because I think my previous speakers already covered it, but I think, first of all, completely agree on the access to the existing funds. I think we're not utilizing those enough for this purpose. So raising the awareness and communicating what is already available, I think would go a long way to showcase and leverage the opportunities of AI. I'm not a defense expert. I focus on my territory on sustainability and energy, but I think this debate around defense, but also resilience and energy security, is a great opportunity because it goes hand in hand with competitiveness, with decarbonization, for Europe specifically. I'm mainly quoting Draghi here, but this can be the competitive advantage and also the opportunity for Europe to be more resilient and independent from external dependencies. So maybe from that angle, there could be a link.
Yeah, good. I mean, everything, that's always a pleasure, right? That's the last time. Oh, yeah, I prefer that. Right. I think, of course, investments in the defense industry, we all likely have customers also within the defense industry. So data is, of course, key also for them. So no doubt that there are opportunities. At the same time, as we are talking here about sustainability in particular, I think one of the comments, the most important comment was made. The climate is not going to go away, the climate issue. So let's not get distracted from that mission to help our customers decarbonize in their value chains. That's going to remain a key thing for also safeguarding our future generations, right? I mean, hopefully, right, wars can stop one day, but the climate will definitely take a very long time before we get that restored. Already at this stage, as we heard earlier in the panel, the 1.5 is already by scientists being said we're not going to make it anymore, right? So let's not get distracted too much and keep on the good work to roll out sustainable futures for everybody.
So thank you for everybody. Wonderful panel. We could have gone 1 hour longer discussing about the AI. A lot of questions. Don't be afraid. I won't be going there. But I think that the whole session has been a wonderful roadshow of different kind of examples. What kind of challenges we have, what kind of possibilities in technologies, in AI, what kind of possibilities in finance, and all of you have brought together what kind of challenges we have for cooperation and for regulation. And to continue this discussion, that I hope that will go on, because it would be such a waste to let this kind of a connection to go away. I know that Roland is going to send a letter to email to all of the speakers, and why not the participants, for a couple of questions. And one is, do you have any that kind of materials? I heard quite some, like the Google's AI opportunity for the EU that I haven't read. I'm going to do that. And they are that kind of a knowledge that you have that we have not been able to read, at least not all. So could you please share that, or that kind of a networks or context that you think that we should be following as a group in Global EU? Then the next one is, and now I'm going back to Diane, how to come to action. And why that question? I mean, what kind of regulatory needs we have? We heard quite a number, and I took a note, but it would be good that you think through and put all them on paper. What kind of a new possibilities of existing regulation, like public procurement, institutions taking advanced position using AI, accounting standards, putting in ESG for small companies with AI, and so forth, because this is what we quite often lack as politicians. Okay, well, what is needed? Then there's, of course, the whole funding, long story. I'm going to come back later with you on this. And the MFF, we all need to be fighting very strong, because there's a real risk that now everything is defense. Everything is very traditional defense. And we are going to lose a lot by that side if that is going to go through. And last but not least is the appeal. We need to work together. So do you have any ideas how within the Global EU and other networks we could actually continue? What are your hopes or expectations for this kind of a cooperation together with VBC SD? And then we could see how to go forward and continue via Global EU the discussion with yourself, your knowledge, plus then try to feed it in parliamentary processes. With these words, 4 minutes. Well done, you panelists. Almost well done myself. Did a lot of speaking on the beginning. And great thanks for our panelists, the speakers, and of course for you as audience. You make the event.